let me preface these remarks with I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars in their intelligence community, in their propaganda community, certainly, and in their leadership. They are inveterate liars. Let me say that again. They are liars.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Some pretty big developments, actually, in regard to, what I'm going to say right out of the gate screams that there's more to the story. Something around the kind of false flaggish type territory that we've seen a lot over the years. And I'm not saying in regard to the shooting and the Washington, D.C. shooting around the Israeli embassy staff that that's what we know for sure. But it's an interesting development seeing as everything else is swirling around it. We're definitely going to talk about today. And as it relates to a few other topics we'll discuss. And I actually think that the way that I frame this today, as usual, as I've said many times in the past, I try to kind of connect these things as they might connect. But I feel a lot of this is very interconnected today. I'm going to start with one thing that I just thought was alarming, fascinating, that I didn't want you to miss, that is around surveillance. And that's just the one quick point and a couple, other quick points around health. But we're going to get into right out of the gate a conversation around ICE, deportations, or rather arrests leading to deportations, and sort of an alarming I told you so moment that we knew, well, technically this is not even the first example. To put it simply, a person has now been arrested who is just as unjust as all the rest of it, but it might hit a little closer to home for those that think this is only related to certain kinds of immigrants. And unfortunately, what the evidence has been showing us from the very beginning. This is not based on anything other than reactionary deportations, possibly for metrics, possibly for something else. But what most of us saw coming was that being framed around politics or more so about race or both at the same time, that really in most cases, those things tend to be tools. Now, a lot of people within it believe certain parts of it, fall for it, drink their own Kool-Aid, if you will. But my opinion, sort of like the USAID point, is a lot of these things are more means to an end, to achieve certain ends. And so when you start to see people that you wouldn't have expected wrapped up into it, sort of like when people who cheer on free speech end up getting censored, it's kind of what many of us expect when we're seeing this from a broader view. And to see people like this get arrested and to see how it's overlapping, or even the Trump supporter or the guy from Texas, many American citizens who have just about been deported or have been arrested for it. It's sadly, and I told you so moment, to recognize that this was building into something much more dark and much more alarming than just going after people that are here illegally, which really nobody should disagree with, except when it's being done without, constitutional rights. So it's always important to see how these things are edging closer towards the problems that have always been, rather the rationale, the justification being put forward for problems that they usually create themselves to carry out a very particular end that we've been seeing built for a long time. And that overlaps with the possible actions, possible false flag actions in Washington, D.C., where we see staff members being shot. And the only reason I even say it like that is because of the many, many examples over the years, which we'll touch on, of the Mossad of Israel being caught, quite literally faking violent actions, shootings, stabbings, getting caught doing fake Nazi marches. Now, people will always reflexively push back on things like that, despite that you can literally read about it in The Guardian or anywhere else. Not that corporate media means that it's true, but that you can prove it for yourself. Many examples, and that's what I'm speaking about, the Skokie, Illinois Nazi march that was caught being the ADL. It's amazing that we can't put these things together over the years. And so when we see things like this, right on the tail end of the Israeli or of the IDF being caught shooting at many different diplomats from Europe, which was a pretty big issue for them, this happens right afterward, or the ongoing genocide, or the massive starvation campaign, or the fact that Netanyahu just said he's going to do Trump's plan, which is that we are going to do what we always told you they were going to do, which is displace everybody, destroy the entire area, take it for themselves. All of that, as much as we all know this, we've been talking about it, for some people it's a big sore thumb sticking out there, and they want you to look anywhere else. And then lastly, of course, is the very obvious and long-term drive to censor you based on hate speech, whether left or right, anti-Semitism always being a focal point for these people. And now with the new bills that have built on the ones Trump passed in his last administration, they're literally now potentially coming after people like us for simply saying Israel's committing genocide. And with what just happened, man, the waterfall has begun. And we will talk about all that today. But let's start with a couple of points that I think are very relevant. This one was around health. And I just think this was interesting to me. And it kind of does speak to the party and the current administration. But please, for those that are new, note the two-party illusion. Do not think this is about one side or the other. Whether maybe it is in the long run, that's not what I'm saying and what I think. Ultimately, I think the reality is the power structure is utilizing our party elements, our division, to achieve the ends it's always been trying to achieve. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I always just ask that you at least consider that very obvious possibility. So in this case, Dr. McCary of the FDA just put out, this was 3 hours ago, it's been 4 to 5 years since we've had a randomized controlled trial. That should be important enough. And so we don't know the number of boosters, COVID boosters, that a healthy American should take. What is that number? Right, because that's the question we're all asking, right? How many boosters should we be taking? Is that what anybody is asking? I mean, we just went over this yesterday with their information. The vast majority of healthcare workers, doctors, nurses are running from these things. Even the elderly, it's like 50%, which is insane to me. And we're still debating whether you should be getting how many of these deadly things. And as I said, not if we should take them, but simply what is the correct amount of deadly mRNA injections your children should be taking. This is the current Trump administration, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that for those that somehow think this is different, not because I think it's the only point. All of it is the point. Left and right, Biden, Trump, the whole damn thing, it's been going in the same direction. And on that same note, True Stream Media puts this out around a post you probably have seen going around about the New York Post article. Weirdly being grabbed by the partisans of the world and try to make it about only Biden's administration, like we're catching them, despite this being without question an overlap of both administrations and well before that, if you understand it, in regard to the shots and everything else. And this is about the admission of myocarditis, bombshell, that I mean, I don't use the term lightly. We were literally proving based on their data, but also, every other aspect you could imagine, real-time evidence of people reporting what they're dealing with, videos of, autopsies of cardiologists and research. It was insane to see how much evidence was coming out showing that this is what was happening. We had precedent-based evidence from before around the flu shot being able to cause myocarditis. Look back through our records, our archives on TLAV and many of other people, especially the IMA, and we were all screaming about this. The point is, May 21st, CDC and the FDA officials were well aware of the risk of myocarditis, which we were telling you, by the way, it's very easy to prove, and took steps to downplay them. To make this, to go, oh, bombshell, Biden hid the facts, is so frustratingly stupid. Now, yes, most of this happened during Biden's administration, but don't forget that this is an important conversation that now overlaps with this current administration, the still use of these shots, or continuing the Stargate platform. But yes, obviously, the bulk of the problem took place in the hiding of it during Biden's administration. But this is Trump's Operation Warp Speed. This is Trump's shot, as even they said. No, that's not what I think. It's the U.S. government's shot. But the point is, the accountability for this and the cover-up that's still happening is not partisan. But that's how that gets played. But True Stream Media rightly says, gee, isn't this swell? They're just telling everyone over and over and over how many crimes against humanity have been committed, while not even one single person involved faces any consequences for their actions, virtually ensuring it will happen again. That should be the major point for people, even within the partisan conversation. I'm even seeing them start to float the idea that, no one's being arrested, without ever really criticizing how insanely, like defending the team and then going, where are all the arrests? And like pointing at nothing, like they're outraged about it. Okay, well, that's the people you support who aren't doing that. Doesn't that show you something? The bigger picture here is that if they're going to keep making these accusations, which are right and important, and nothing happens, all they're doing is cementing in your mind that happened and now it's okay, we're moving forward. Precedent. We all knew this. The reality is it's left and right. And the problem is now they're showing you what they did to you, which we were being censored for before that, and nothing's happening. And the same FDA and the same CDC and the same people involved to some degree are continuing the same problem. Now, as we recently pointed to, Regeneron bought 23andMe and the overlap that with genetic data, material, and experimentation, as well as surveillance, both internal and outward. The point is they bought this and they're using this data exactly like we told you they would. I mean, you could probably literally look up my show from all those years ago where I said this about this topic and said, don't do 23andMe. I guarantee you, even though they say right here they won't do it, they'll end up doing it. And here we are. Every single stupid time. And it's so infuriating that we have to make it every time, even though it should be, basic like deductive logic to recognize how this happens every time. The point is that data is being used just like we promised to roll over into this direction for, the kind of Oracle health direction, using your data to create the Stargate platform. They're using the data they scooped up during COVID, but all of this comes together, whether it's private companies, whether it's Trump's team, whether it's the U.S. government or the global agenda. Now here, the White House, U.S. White House scraps plan to block data brokers from selling American sensitive data. That was May 14th. Sure sounds like they care about that, right? Even if you don't think they're involved in what this is allowing the world, or rather more specifically, the profiteering companies that are stacked in the U.S. government to just use your data however they see fit, sell it, chop it up, make digital twins. That's how this works. Now, that overlaps with the idea of how they're tracking that data. These are all just things I wanted you to see that we'll go into in more depth if and when we do a focus on this, which we always will. The Ford Panopticon, they are just straight up making fun of us. I saw that and was like, is that a joke? And then you read into it and no, sure enough, the Ford, I didn't highlight it. I wanted to make this quick, but the point is simply the Ford Panopticon crowdsourced car tracking revealed in new patent, February 28th. Microphone eavesdropping to serve more. Well, I'll read the first paragraph. It says, we all know automakers want to keep tabs on their cars. Hardly what it's really about. Stolen vehicle tracking? Sure. That's how they got their foot in the door. It's insane. Fleet management? Fine. Microphone eavesdropping to ensure more ads? They did that too. That's happening. Just like online, people just ignore it. And it says, hate it, but okay, that's a thing. People become just blight. That's like we're talking about with everything else. The more you let that continue, myocarditis or anything else, after a few years, they just go, well, nobody cared. Isn't that just okay? We've been doing it for 5 years. They've been spying on you. People don't even know that half the time. Tesla made that very clear with their Cybertruck. But it says, hold on to your tinfoil hats. Ford just published a patent for something that takes vehicle tracking into full-blown Twilight Zone territory. Always on tracking in your car, which, by the way, is really not that bombshell. That's how your phone and whatever else. Understand today that even when you turn these things off, they're still tracking you. I've proven that so many times. Or, for example, if you have your internet turned off and you're using your GPS, take note of if you have your internet turned off or for some reason don't have a phone plan, it won't let you track or find a destination. However, if you're using it and while you're moving, you turn your phone off, your plan goes out or whatever else, suddenly, or you have no Wi-Fi, it will keep tracking you. I've proven that before. And I find that very, very telling that they don't want you to know, or they won't let you use the app while you don't have it, even though they could. It's all about creating that illusion. So here's the patent we'll talk about. And it says, wait, I can't turn off the tracking? That's the whole point. So we'll go into this more in depth. Here's the actual patent if you want to look further. Crowdsourced tracking of vehicles having disabled positioning or communication systems. A vehicle has a long-range tracking system configured to provide vehicles tracking data to be shared remotely by long-range tracking systems. Now, to me, whatever their narrative is, this is very obviously about a total information awareness kind of Palantir dynamic where no matter what you do, where you go, not only are you being tracked, but you're being tracked in a what's the right way to put it? Where like it says, in kind of like a group dynamic where you're basically tracking the cars and the people and everything else involved and all being real-time share. We just talked about the overlap of different states, even over countries, that genetic, but also everything else in regard to surveillance. It says a trigger monitor detects a failure of the long-range tracking system to share the vehicle tracking data remotely. A tag transceiver is configured for local wireless data transfer with client devices outside the vehicle. So your phones. The tag transceiver operates independently of a long-range tracking system, and the local wireless data transfer has a range of less than 100 meters. The tag transceiver is responsive to detection of the failure of the long-range tracking system by the trigger monitor to, 1, perform a local area beacon exchange with one or more client devices to estimate a vehicle location, and 2, request at least one of the client devices to relay a message containing the estimated vehicle location and the predetermined identifier of the vehicle to remote site. It just, this never stops, and it never ends up, no matter what we want, this is always presented as what everybody should want. And add to that, and I will go through this in depth. This is just to put it on your radar. Carrie points this out. All this together, I think, is an important kind of one-stop point. Everything we showed you so far, the tracking, the health data, the cars overlap, and now this. Gizmodo reports FBI Director Kash Patel abruptly closes internal watchdog office overseeing what? Surveillance compliance. Almost like it all comes together, right? And Carrie says the government investigating itself was a little too much accountability, apparently. She's making fun of them. I guess the office was created during, she goes, I guess, the office was created during the first Trump administration as a watchdog for FISA, Section 702. What they all pretend they care about when the other side uses it, but they all keep wanting to use it. I'm sure Patel will personally make sure surveillance powers aren't abused just as soon as he provides the Epstein files. Guys, you realize that the FISA, that was very quickly put away. Nobody cared. Trump, like every, and the last one too, they all keep kicking the can down the road, despite all of them calling it out when they want to make it look like they care about your surveillance. All very important. Now, I want to keep this in your mind today before we get into the overlap, because realize how much the surveillance does in every sense overlap with what they're doing around the immigration conversation. Derek and I were up in arms from the very beginning, first and foremost, about whatever the intentions of how the immigration was rolled out, even if they did every single part of it on the up and up, just deporting people here illegally, giving them due process. They had still rolled out the emergency, and they still opened the door to this massive Palantir surveillance panopticon. And they're using this to, as we've already shown you, track, surveil, biometrics, facial scans, all of this. And on top of that, telling you they're going to build that out in order to be able to do this continually. Now, I recently just put aside, I don't think I'm going to talk about it today, but the alarming nature of what they're building out. I think I mentioned in the last show, actually. ICE is now building out with what their big bill that apparently just passed, which I'll probably go into at some point as well, that Massey will happily tell you is the opposite of what Trump's team is telling you, which is that it will put ICE or turn ICE into the largest like Gestapo force that we've ever seen in this country. Bigger budget than FBI and anything else. And if you just want to keep pretending it's about getting rid of a couple of immigrants, or I shouldn't even say it like that, since there's clearly a manufactured problem that does exist. I've never denied that. So the large problem it is, recognizing they're still making it about getting rid of some immigrants, despite the fact that it's much, much, much bigger than that. That's why that part overlaps with this. But keeping in mind, this article from the show from January 13th, the fake globalist resistance the fake globalist resistance ushering in the globalist plan, which, my God, I know a lot of times it's easy to see it when you're in it and you're researching. But am I crazy? Is this not like the most obvious thing in the world? It's not like they're doing some sidestep. They're literally rolling out the things we talk about. They're rolling out the Stargate platform. They're collaborating with global, and they're like, whether it's globalism, technocracy, just everything we're talking about, they are rolling it out in the most transparent ways. And if it's really pushed, people like Anderson will tell you that it's, well, we gotta use the good oligarchs and the good elitists to fight back against the bad ones. So they're admitting it if you really push it, but it's the good guys though. I just think it's mind-blowing how clear this is. And all the different shills out there that have been telling you how long they've been fighting this, who are now suddenly pulling all their punches. And we'll talk about some of that today. Or as Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, which is so shockingly obvious, Team Sport Republicans endorse the North American Union, which is a major part of the globalist plan. But talking about how the immigration overlaps with this, I think this is really important. And also, I think what's funny is that I expect some of them out there maybe think, I think what's funny is a lot of the partisan arguments out there, some of them don't necessarily realize that they, like I said, they drink their own Kool-Aid, like they're trapped in their own partisan, as much as they know they're stoking and using it, that at the same time, it's like they can only see through the lens that you're the other side, right? So it's not that you just care about immigrants or due process, you just hate white people, or you only hate Republicans, and maybe I guarantee that exists to some very ignorant, small, ridiculous, we should all laugh at them degree, and they all are playing that stupid game. Now, even though, let's just even say it's 5%, it's a ton of people. I think it's a little more than that. I don't think it's a lot. I think most people out there are more discerning, even if it's a small amount, to where they still fall into these things day after day, but they're not the cat turd idiots out there. Or what's the alternative on the right now? That's just such the focal point that I'm trying to think of the left examples. Oh, they're out there. Trust me. We were focusing on them during COVID-19. My point, though, is that those people I don't think represent the full picture or even the close majority. And so I think that they're expecting you to ignore this because they think you only care about your secret Hamas support or whatever ridiculous narrative that they've put in their mind. And so this is really important to understand. One, because we told you that this would happen, and it's not about the one guy. It's about the broadening idea of this, where it's just about getting, like, for what I think is important is wondering whether or not there's more to this story that hopefully develops. What did he do to catch this attention? Is it just literally that we'll get into that he has that they said it's a paper, what was the word they used? I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I want to make this point before we start. Basically that there's an issue with his paperwork from 5 or 10 years ago. And he's up to date. He's going to his meetings and he's in jail right now. He's been in jail for months. For what? For what crime? Like, this is what's so insane to me. Now, I wonder, did he tweet about Israel? Did he write something? I don't know, because we do know Ozturk's a good example. We'll point to that in a second. That's all you need. Criticism of Israel. Ask Qatar USA. They're dropping your name in front of Trump right now. Also, as the courts have proven, somebody almost went to El Salvador because of a lie they put in a tweet. 48 hours they had him in prison. He just about got sent, and he proved they were lying. And the judge called it out and said it came from this tweet alone, and that Noam tried to punish him by making sure he stayed in jail despite knowing that they didn't have the evidence. That's the very Noam that just openly said that she, or I would argue, accidentally exposed herself for not knowing what habeas corpus means. I was going to see if I had that real quick, if it's relevant. In case you hadn't seen it. Now, I think I posted over it, but the bottom line is, asked point blank, do you know what is habeas corpus? And she said it's a right the president has to deport people. Now, I still don't think that was by accident. I think she actually doesn't know what she's talking about, and that's why they're being chosen. I truly believe that. But so coming back to this, ICE imprisons Danish dad of 4 at citizenship interview. And so the point is not just that it's broadening out to anybody other than immigrants you think are rapists and terrorists, or whether there are or not, by the way, but it also continues to show you that this is about, I think there's something bigger happening here. Like, there's so many different ways you could look at this. I just don't think it is about what we're being told. Like, sort of like with the Khalil point, it turned out that it was about something coming from a Zionist group asking for him to be deported. And I think that there's something like that, or Ozturk and the op-ed. So let's go through this, and you can decide why, or you can understand why this is broadening out more than it is. And I just think that people like the Trump supporter and the guy who was arrested, who want to think that's all it's about, the simplest idea is that you should not be okay with the way this is going down, whether the person's brown or black or white, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, it doesn't matter. It should matter to you because there's no due process being given, or rather these people are not being given their right. They're being accused for something illegitimate, or like a ticket they had from 5 years ago, and saying, okay, yank their visa because they had a traffic ticket. Like, that arguably is not legal. It's just so outside of the realm, or that all these people are wearing, these ICE enforcers are out there wearing masks. They're not giving warrants. They're not even showing their badges half the time. So for a moment there, so many of them out there were willing to ignore it all because they thought it was only happening to brown people who thought they thought were bad. So when it starts to creep into a conversation of like Trump supporters or a Danish family with 4 kids, and it's the same conversation, does that change your mind a bit? Does it make you wonder whether there's something else going on? Because in my point, it should matter regardless, like it does with any other conversation we're talking about. It shouldn't matter more that people are dying in Gaza, whether they're Israeli, Palestinian, or Israeli, Christian, or whatever it is, or whether they're just Palestinian, or whether there's an American there. Only it seems to be focused on what category they need to use. Oh, that's right. Pretty much the whole thing. So ICE imprisoned a Danish father of 4. It's right there in the first sentence. A paperwork miscommunication. So this is my point is, I don't even know. You're telling me that you would go through all this and actually spend that much money, by the way, to detain him, to hold him, which is your tax dollars, when you could have just been like, let's figure out the paperwork miscommunication. Now, why would they go after a guy like this? Unless it really is just literally anybody. And maybe they are just trying to meet metrics to be like, look how many we deported, even if they're not guilty. Imprisoned a Danish father of 4 due to a paperwork miscommunication, according to his American wife. Casper, I think probably Joel Erickson, 32 years old, welder, legally in the country with a 5th child on the way, was detained by ICE during a citizenship appointment. Now, next I'll make the point about how shockingly common this is. People are showing up for their actual meetings, not criminals, showing up to go to their meetings, whether it's because they have an asylum hearing or because they're trying to get their citizenship. And ICE is arresting them before they can go to their hearings or having them dismissed by the people involved before even giving them that process, all of which is a violation of their constitutional rights. They don't care. So he's going to this meeting. And they detained him during the citizenship appointment, April 15th, because of a decade-old paperwork miscommunication. Now, here's what's crazy is it seems as if it's almost impossible to find out what's going on, what that was. Why couldn't it have been solved over the phone if it's a miscommunication? Maybe it's another lie. Now, I'm not even saying that as some kind of half-hearted comment, guys. Do you realize how many examples, even the show will go over, where ICE is not just going oopsie, but you can prove wholesale, whole cloth lying? What the kid in Texas, for example, both sides of it, both the agent and Trump's administration person lied about where they found this person. Both of them were wrong. He lives in Texas. He's a U.S. citizen. Now he's free. And both of them lied about where they found him. You have to understand, that's not up for debate. So they both knowingly lied to cover up what was happening. Why would they be doing that if they thought what they were doing was on the up and up? Savannah Erickson said they were blindsided when they arrived in Memphis, Tennessee. If anybody has contact with them, I'd love to connect with them. I'm sure they're pretty adverse to speaking to the media right now. It says at what they believe would be a routine interview, meaning he's been going to his interviews every time, just like Garcia was, by the way, in the final stage of obtaining his permanent American citizenship. So in this case, literally going through this long-term vetting and meeting process to do what we all claim they're supposed to do, and now being punished for that. After driving 3 hours north from their home in Sturgis, Mississippi, Savannah said her husband was confronted by ICE agents who took him in custody. Oh, I felt like I thought it was in Tennessee. Maybe they're overlap, but it says confronted by ICE agents who took him into custody and explained there was a paperwork error dating back to 2015, which again to me shows you they're searching for the smallest thing to just get bodies. He was then taken to an ICE detention facility in rural Gina, Louisiana. Now, that seems to be their go-to right now. And as we already reported, they're leaning into places that are more amenable to whatever they want to do, which has become pretty clear. Now, you just wonder if the name, because of how ridiculous these people are, maybe somehow stood out to them as they maybe misinterpreted that name as something else. I mean, I really just think this is wild. He was taken to ICE detention facility in Louisiana. Now, Verrett News wrote that detainees at the privately run facility, that's probably why as well, because we talked about this in the beginning. Remember, the facilities the Trump administration were leaning into were very much overlap with their inner circle, with people they worked with. They're wildly profiting from this. You know, the suffering of other people. Typical. That's not unique to one side or the other. Detainees at the private run facilities, they've observed rodent droppings on kitchen surfaces and human excrement in the shower area, and have alleged that prolonged isolation led to medical and mental health issues. Savannah, who is due in August, she's pregnant, and said she currently has a high-risk pregnancy, criticized officials for how they handled the case. She says, quote, what could have been corrected with paperwork has resulted in a month-long detention. He's still currently in jail, by the way, of my husband, and a devastating situation for our children and myself, as well as my high-risk pregnancy. ICE did not respond for request, of course, because they're completely nameless, faceless, and unaccountable right now. Savannah, and really, just like the nurses and doctors during COVID, they're drunk on power. That's becoming pretty evident. Savannah told Mississippi Today that her husband's move towards citizenship appeared to be on track. No red flags from ICE. The Daily Beast could not. So tell me this. The last 5, 10, 20 meetings he went to over the last decade. Why wasn't he arrested then? 2015 miscommunication. So why now all of a sudden? Because now they're deciding to. They're looking for arbitrary reasons to this. I don't need to tell you that. That's self-evident. The Daily Beast could not find any criminal record for Erickson. Why would we expect different? That's 75% of the people they sent to El Salvador, including speeding tickets. He didn't even have speeding tickets, which, by the way, even Daily Beast and conservative platform mentions, which have been used as justification to arrest and deport immigrants. Visa holders, people legally here with a traffic ticket from a decade ago, are in El Salvador or deported to some third world country. And by the way, the weird nature in which they're trying to not send them anywhere other than places that they can be abused is very strange and telling. The lie about Venezuela not wanting them has already been proven to be a lie, and I'm willing to bet you it's the same anywhere else. They seem to be wholesale lying about every part of the story, and maybe that's the angle, because people go, they can't lie about everything. Yeah, quite literally seems to be every part of the story. Savannah told the news site, it says, she declined an interview with Daily Beast. It says, Savannah told the news site that she was forced to drive back alone from this appointment, pregnant, not knowing where her husband was being taken or why, with a high-risk pregnancy. She says, to say I couldn't control my emotions would be an understatement. The next 24 hours would, without a doubt, be the most frightening and stressful I've ever experienced, and I pined for my husband and some kind of communication to confirm his safety and whereabouts. Now, for some, they may not care. But if you understand what that could do to a pregnancy, let alone a high-risk pregnancy, an idea that she had to drive herself back home, completely wrought with, not even knowing what happened, like with Khalil and the rest. They're not giving information. She didn't know where he was taken, what's going on. For all she knows, he's in El Salvador. If she had lost the pregnancy on the way home, would that be their fault? Savannah said attorneys filed a petition to seek Erickson's release. They met with him on May 15th to review that document. So they met on May 15th. It's now May 22nd, and he's still in prison. Jail. Whatever you want to call the detention facility he's in. It will be up to a judge, it says, to decide whether he can return home to his family. Oh, so now they care what the judge has to say. So now they can't let him back out knowing that this is completely arbitrary, knowing they could solve this on their own. But now they're bound by the judge, whatever the judge says, except literally everywhere else they could care less what the judge says. They are playing with people's lives. I mean, to a degree that is so disgusting, it makes me, I almost can't understand how this makes sense. Whether it's what Israel's doing to people in Gaza and playing with their lives, torturing them, setting them death shrouds and claiming they're giving them food, which is literally what happened, or arresting people like this, right? Where we're talking about people like Garcia, for example, acting like we can't do anything about it, even though you're legally supposed to deal with that situation, or sending people who are gay barbers who have no criminal record to a dangerous prison in El Salvador, or any number of examples, or this guy who they know they've made a mistake, or maybe not, depending on why they arrested him in their minds, and then saying we can't do anything without a judge. They're playing. They're laughing at you. Like this, I can't stress that enough, to see the gnomes and the rest of them sit out there and act like you're the one doing this. Like the way that they're treating this is maybe for self-preservation. That's clearly part of it, so they don't get in trouble for what they know they're doing, which is wrong. But just, you got to realize that kind of an action, when they know they can correct it very easily, is about, one, not exposing that you are the wrong one, which is very childish, but also maybe just because they want people to suffer for some reason, which I don't know whether this is that or not, but we know that's a part of it. As we just said with the kid we were talking about, where they made sure he had to stay for 48 hours, despite the claim being proven to be false, because they wanted to punish him for Palestinian support. That's what the court said. Erickson, back to the story, Erickson first came to the U.S. in 2009 on a foreign exchange student at high school, where he met his wife. Then the then teenager started dating and continued the relationship even after he returned to his home country. She said they would fly across the Atlantic Ocean to visit each other. Savannah said they eventually married. Erickson immigrated to the United States in 2013 with a green card. He began working as a welder in the tiny Mississippi town, which had a population of 202 as of 2022. He said he is still a welder and is building our family home with his bare hands. In a GoFundMe, which is linked there, which has raised $17,000, I think it's up to 20-something thousand now, by Wednesday morning, Savannah said Erickson's income sustained their entire family. So the last month he's been in jail for no reason. Are they able to feed their kids? These are things that should matter, especially, or regardless, to everybody. It shouldn't only matter to you because this person is a white person who's here legally, because you realize that's basically been people they've been arresting too. Right? I mean, it's frustrating that we have to make that distinction. These are people that are suffering because of what they're doing illegitimately. And this has been happening to immigrants. It's been happening to Americans. It's happening all over this country. She said she homeschools their children and that they raise animals on their ranch, which I guarantee they're struggling to deal with since she's pregnant. His Facebook page suggests he also has an affinity for hunting, Mississippi State football, and opposed vaccine mandates, in case that matters, whether you decide to now think his opinion matters, seeing as how he said that. Savannah said she is working with elected officials to help get Erickson home. She posts regular updates on her social media, asking those in the community to pray for his release and, if willing, to write letters attesting to his character. Savannah said her husband's GoFundMe on that Casper's a loving husband, devoted father, and proud landowner in the United States, paying taxes, has a valid driver's license, social security number, came here legally with a green card in 2013 when they married. He's a valued, loved, and well-respected man in their community, and he's currently in prison. I mean, I just don't, this should break through to some people to recognize, even if you think it's a mistake, that this is what can happen when you allow this kind of unfettered, unconstitutional government power. They're exploding. Funny how, as Kerry just said the other day, that it's funny how the people that wanted to call for smaller government and a pushback on deep state are the ones that are literally screaming praise for growing the government, more spending, the exact opposite, but promises kept, apparently. So just basically, as of today, still in jail, detained by ICE in Louisiana. Now here is, I forget, I've seen this person as overlap with the kind of America First MAGA side, not really super familiar with the work. Mila Joy, 264,000. Well, and this is a video of people being arrested at ICE or by ICE at immigration hearings. Literally, and you can listen to the report, a minute long of the reporter, and they ask some questions, being arrested as they go to their meetings. So not scaling the fence and raping and murdering, but people that are literally trying to do what you keep telling them none of them do, and then getting arrested for it. She says they showed up for their immigration hearing, but instead they were rounded up by ICE. And she literally says, I voted for this. You voted for unconstitutional actions. I mean, maybe you should reflect on that for a second. Or maybe you guys don't realize that you don't understand the Constitution. People have the legitimate constitutional right, whether illegal alien or not, which, by the way, they're not in that context, seeing as how they were going through the process of asylum, or the other case was a citizenship hearing. So the point is, they weren't here illegally. But either way, the point is they do have constitutional rights, in particular with due process. Reno versus Flores is one of the most important cases. Scalia mentioned it himself. Here's Melinda that says, every illegal should be deported. See how frustrating this is? We're not talking about illegals here, Melinda. You're not paying attention, but probably doesn't matter to you either way. It doesn't matter if they've been here for 20 or 30 years. We don't care. They're all illegals. This is the kind of grotesque, childish, like bottom, lowest common denominator that we're seeing out there. And man, are they leaning into it. Also, probably lots of bots. I wouldn't surprise me right now. I personally have a much higher opinion of most people in this country. I don't believe that most people are that disgusting. That you would argue, first of all, that that's what they are, even though we're dealing provably every day with people that are not here illegally. But even then, the idea that you would argue that they should not have any kind of process, even though we've already seen the government claim people are illegal, and then it turns out they weren't here illegally, including an American citizen, you can't be this stupid. Aaron Melnick points out that they are doing this on a massive scale. Now, there was an overlap about this being illegal in the first place, but I'm not sure where that lands. ICE arrests continued today, this is as of today, at immigration courts nationwide. People showing up for courts are being handcuffed in the hallways by ICE officers with lists of names after ICE prosecutors moved to dismiss the case. Here's what those officers looked like in Seattle. Look at this. Why are they all masked up? Why are they not why are they wearing regular clothes? Where are their badges? Explain for me why that makes sense. Now, look, you could argue because they're going to run, maybe. But then explain for me, once they arrest them, why you still don't see those things. Why are they wearing masks? Why are they not showing badges? There've been no warrant. Ask Ozturk, ask Khalil. They're not giving warrants or identifying themselves. It's been proven endless amount of times. He goes on to say, stories are coming from around the country about these agents, which have occurred in in LA, Miami, San Francisco, Phoenix, Seattle, New York City, Chicago, other places with immigration courts. The goal of the Trump administration's efforts are to erase the rights to see a judge. That does seem like, and you know why? Because every single time so far, we've seen them have to do that. And no, not because they're all radical lefties. Many of them have been Trump appointed or conservative. They say that's not enough evidence. You know why? Because it's not. They don't have it. And this is what's so frustrating is you can literally look for yourself at what the evidence was presented. And the only thing you're going to get is, radical judge, and they don't control the White House. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Not to say that there are examples where judges can very clearly overstep their position. But the point is that's where you then come back and make that clear and potentially have them, lose standing for something because, or rule in an incorrect way. The bottom line is that this is the way they're doing this is to try to stop them from being able to see the judge, because if they do, or even, by the way, make clear about this. This does not mean there's a jury trial happening, despite the claims of people like Miller and the rest that keep watering this down. It can be very rapidly done. And the bottom line is, whether you think it should be or not, it is what is the constitutional reality. So either argue you don't care about the Constitution or that you think it should be done even though it's difficult. Those are the only real two honest positions. And so here, if you're not being able to see a judge, you're not being able to say, I'm an American citizen, or I was here legally, here's my green card, or blah, 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 or present your evidence and say, I didn't commit those crimes, whatever it is. They're not allowing that. They're, in fact, going out of their way to make sure it doesn't happen, because I think it's been clear that they don't have the evidence. And in many cases are doing so, like, for example, the kid that was, or the guy that was potentially sent to El Salvador because of the Batar tweet that was arrested for 48 hours. Now ask yourself, if he had not been given due process, he'd be in El Salvador right now. Ask yourself how that makes sense. They lied about him, you understand? They were this close to sending him, and the reason he wasn't is because he was able to prove that the claims were false. If he wasn't given that process, he'd be in prison for life right now. I mean, you just don't need more examples than that. That right there, even if that was the only possible, only time it happened, shows you how it can happen and why that process is necessary. You guys all know this. If this was about something else and it wasn't about immigrants and it wasn't partisan, you'd all be on the same page about this. The new effort by the Trump administration is aimed primarily at people with no criminal record. And this is all easy to prove. Many are entered legally at a port of entry and are going through the steps of this process. These people are seen as low-hanging fruit for an administration wanting to juice deportation numbers and by skipping the formal court processes. He goes on to say, in Phoenix, multiple people who were arrested there were there to attend their first court hearing. One man had entered the country legally last year and was showing up for his court date as required. Thanks he got was to be thrown in detention. So, I mean, in a way, sort of like Israel anti-Semitism, or the way that they stoke it, which we'll get to in a minute. I mean, you're literally creating a dynamic where through grabbing them this way, you're almost creating more illegal immigration. Because why in the world would they go through this process if they know that you're just going to scoop them up and send them away anyway? Now you're going, well, shoot, I can just jump this fence. It's much easier. They probably won't find me for years. In this case, he went through the process and here's the worst part. He might not just get sent back to a country. We'll go to that next. They're sending these people to Libya, to Sudan. Which, by the way, in a recent show, I said Somalia when I meant the Sudan about the terrorist watch list. In case you guys remember, that was a mistake. I thought about it after the show. They're being sent to other countries. Some of them from Mexico, and they're not even sending them to Mexico. Like, they're going out of the way to make sure they don't go to Mexico. Why does that make sense? There's something darker happening here. And one of it, I think, is about setting up the normalization for sending Palestinians to some of these places. I really think that might be the major point. Now, it says in Miami, multiple men were arrested after their court hearings, with ICE prosecutors having dismissed their cases moments earlier. One man was there with his wife and his daughter, only he was taken to custody. The Trump administration goal, no day in court. Now, some of these people you might argue are being, they got their day, they dismissed the case in front of them. Okay, I would disagree with that, seeing as how they're not actually getting that dynamic. But what we have to understand is that there are people who went through legally and then were showing up for their first court date. To argue then that you could dismiss that case and then just deport them for what cause? They literally came in going, I want to be a citizen. Is that not how this works? Yet the screaming Trump supporters out there that don't want to acknowledge this will never admit that's the reality. We'll try to, and you know why? Because Trump and Noam and Bondi stand up there and say rapists and terrorists and traffickers and show you some article from 20 years ago or point to one of the examples and everybody jumps on board. And that's not to say there's not an obvious problem. People who are committing crimes have to be dealt with. They shouldn't be ignored, whether they're an immigrant or not. And no, if they're here illegally, they shouldn't be allowed to stay here. They should be deported, 100%. That's not what's happening right now. In Miami, multiple men are arrested after their court hearings. It goes on to say, for generations, lawyers could advise their client that they shouldn't be afraid to show up to immigration court. So long as the judge didn't rule them deported at the hearing, they'd be safe. Now, in the span of a few days, the Trump admin has seriously eroded that message. In cases where people, again, were legally here, going through the normal process, it's kind of, it is alarming. It is a rapidly increasing problem. And as it increases, they're constantly gesturing towards Americans, other unconstitutional acts, and the momentum from people just can't seem to see it in some cases. Now, Ryan Grimm points out ICE has rejected, this is about Khalil, has rejected the request by Khalil, who, by the way, who's still being held, and they're trying to deport him, who has no criminal record. They haven't charged him with a crime. He's got no evidence of anything other than protesting Israel. Despite their flailing efforts and claims, they have continued to fail because there is no evidence. But here's the thing, that's the same point we're just making. Even though that's the case and you can read for yourself, there are people still out there that claim he was a racist, Jew-hating person that trapped people in a library. It's not true, guys. That's not even true about the actual case. No, but he wasn't even there for that event. And that's not even what happened. But it doesn't matter for some people. Khalil is not charged with a crime. Oh, sorry. It says he's rejected the request by Khalil to have a contact visit with his newborn baby so he can hold his baby for the first time. They wouldn't let him. He's not charged with a crime, and yet he remains behind bars for speaking out about Israel. Now, let's not forget the overlap of the current anti-Semitism legislation where they're trying to make that a crime. But weirdly not really enforcing it because I think they know even their supporters would go, wait a minute, that's speech. But you see, they're incrementally creating the outrage position. So if it turns out to be somebody they can claim as a rapist and a murderer and might actually be, that's where people go, well, no. You see, if you care about these things, regardless of who he is, you would say it doesn't matter. The process is the same. And if you can prove he is those things, do so, and we'll put him in jail or deport him. By the way, an overlapping point I'm not going to get into today. They're now trying to get people deported who like people that commit murder. Somebody gets caught committing murder. The evidence is obvious, and they're like, deport him. And as Melnick points out, it's like, that's a get out of jail free card. You're literally letting a murderer get away for an agenda, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Now, we just talked about the over 50, same point, over 50 people that they can prove who are in El Salvador, who were in this country legally with no criminal record. Here's the actual article, the Cato Institute, libertarian platform, showing you this, and really well done. Evidence, source material. They are sending people to a Guantanamo Bay style prison for nothing. No criminal record, just for being in the wrong place. And they're not criminals. They're not gang members, despite all the screaming. So one thing I think is now happening is trying to make something, like I just said, to give you an example that'll make it seem as if that is what's happening. I think they did that partially with the MS-13 member that they did send. They had a case they built for years, but then they dropped the case and sent him to El Salvador. But then it turned out that's because Bukele had an agreement with these people, and he didn't want them to testify in the U.S. about the agreement that they had, which was, hey, if you work with us, MS-13, and lower your violence so it'll look like we're doing right, then we will allow you to do what you want. And that's been called out by the U.S. government. We went over this in a different show. I think I can grab the article from Drop Site if you'd like to read about it, seeing as how that probably sounds outrageous to those that don't know about it. There it is. Secret Bukele deal lies behind Trump's El Salvador deportations. It's a great article. It's very important. Brian Grimm and Jose Olivieras. The point, though, is that they sent that MS-13 member to El Salvador, which probably got him, now he's not getting held accountable, which is the point. But I think, and one thought was they did that to me, like, see, that guy, he's a real gang member. We can prove it, which then makes you assume the rest are. So same kind of thing here. Trump administration defends deportation flight to South Sudan. Attacking judge. Of course, but despite, the idea that these people are not all radical judges. Some of them are conservative, some are Trump appointees. Let's not forget as well, the U.S.-Israeli hand in the Sudan civil war. They are just like everywhere else. And this is not some will accuse Israel no matter what. You can read it for yourself. It's transparent. And the U.S. has been involved in this for a long time. And they're happy, just like with Haiti, by the way. Why don't you hear them calling for elections in Haiti? Because they don't care, because they already get what they want from it. They're happy to keep it that way. Or Libya, for that matter. They want it the way it is, which is not those countries anymore, apparently. But here, it says the Homeland Security Department, backwards, on Wednesday defended its decision to deport 8 migrants on a flight to South Sudan, but remained coy about whether the war-torn nation would be the group's final destination. And on top of that, they did this in contrast to what the Supreme Court just ruled. Yet again, showing you that they literally don't care. It says the flight came after multiple court decisions barring the DHS from removing migrants from the country. Very clear. Including, and it's by the Supreme Court, by the way, 6 conservative judges on the Supreme Court, including an emergency order requiring the U.S. government to maintain custody of these very men. In a rushed press conference, and again, this article is from the 21st, yesterday. In a rushed press conference, DHS officials described the 8 men as monsters. Now, here's the interesting thing on this. I do actually think, in this case, the evidence shows these people are criminals. Right? That the evidence they had, and I think that's why this was chosen. But the point still stands that they've lied about damn near every single thing they've done here. So you should be wondering whether they might be lying about them too. But from what I can see, these people do seem like criminals. Now it says 8 men are monsters while attacking the Massachusetts-based federal judge set to hold them. Now here's the thing, like I said before, whether or not they're monsters, the law still applies, guys. You can't just be like, well, they're super bad, so they don't get processed. Like, it's just not how that works. And that's my point. They will always use the easy case, right? So, well, they are pretty bad. Well, it doesn't change the reality that they should be proven that they are bad. So then they can be sent and be, not, I mean, even even let's just say in the United States, if that's not the case, you could appeal the thing later and they can overturn the charge, but they're being sent to prisons elsewhere in the world. The bottom line is that it doesn't matter how bad their crimes are. They still have rights to be shown. Right, due process, or in any case, like the same thing with this country. They can argue that you are just a, terrorist, so therefore you don't have your rights, and that's what they've been doing for a long time. That overlap with Syria, where there are people getting scooped up in prisons in Guantanamo that turned out to not actually be, but they said they spent decades there. We have to realize how long this has been building, and now they're doing it right in front of you, and Trump has gestured towards Americans and said they're next 5 times. Well, we'll see how we can do it within the law. That's pretty alarming. No country on earth wanted to accept them, they say, which I call as a lie. Because they said the same thing about Venezuela, and that's been proven to be a lie. So whether they want them back or not is up for debate. Maybe they don't. They're bad people, as the evidence seems to suggest, but question these things because they've been caught lying. Because their crimes are so uniquely monstrous and barbaric, these heinous individuals have terrorized American streets for too long. That's Tricia McLaughlin, saying men had been convicted of crimes, noting the men had been convicted of crimes like rape and murder. Quote, now a local judge in Massachusetts is trying to force the United States to bring these people back, these uniquely barbaric monsters. Well, the only reason is because you did not you did not follow the law. The only reason, by the way, that they were holding off, not saying don't deal with these people, is because of everything else, because of everything they're doing, because of the illegitimate actions, the Alien Enemies Act, the deportations to countries that are illegal, the actions of, almost sending Americans, in some cases sending Americans, or Garcia in El Salvador being a court ruling from 2019. I mean, in countless amount of ways, or in every step forward, not giving due process to any of them. And so the judges, they're saying everything has to wait, and these people in particular, until we can suss what's going. You can prove what you're doing. Or in this case, even prove that you gave them due process, which seems to be never happening. Not that we go bring them all back because we don't care, but that's how the partisan game frames it. These Democrats want rapists in your country. And it's just like, it's sad that anybody even falls for that. Even if that may be the case in some people. This is not what's happening here. Whether they think that or not, the people and what's happening, the reality is, from a very core point, that we are watching fundamental realities of this country get torn apart using those partisan hatred. Or that partisan hatred. He says, earlier this month, Murphy informed the administration that plans to deport migrants to Libya and Saudi Arabia would violate an existing court order blocking removal of any members of the class impacted by the suit. So it's just a broad idea until they get through the suit. Now, the point is, had the Trump administration gone through the right legal processes from the beginning, none of this would even be happening. They would already be removed. They'd be, if they had simply done what they're supposed to do. It's not. And they frame that as them stopping immigration, when if you really step back and look at it, they're the ones stopping it by not doing the legal process. And it says, none of the men informed of their pending removal were from either country. So that on top of it all, I think is important. The idea of sending people to a country they're not from, there's just no precedent for this. It doesn't make any sense. Then Tuesday, attorneys for several of the men said the Trump administration placed several men on a flight to South Sudan. A country in the midst of a civil war, by the way. So in any context, why you're going to send them to a place that's chaotic? It just doesn't make sense. And again, you could argue, we don't care, they're bad people. Well, because they're bad people doesn't mean that you have to be a bad person. It's a simple idea that sending them there doesn't make sense from a human perspective. Send them to a prison or somewhere else. The bottom line is you're doing this, I think, for other reasons, in my opinion, to normalize the idea of grabbing up people who you claim are terrorists or bad people, see the overlap, and sending them somewhere else for the best interest of the place, or the people. Like it's kind of a broad idea, and we see that being laid out. And don't forget the Libya point. I feel like they were trying to rush people over to Libya right before that conversation started. I think they're building these blocks right now. Just my opinion. Now, it says Murphy late Tuesday issued an emergency order requiring the Trump administration to maintain custody and control of class members currently being removed to South Sudan or to any other third country to ensure the practical feasibility of return if the court finds that such removals were unlawful. Again, it wouldn't be an issue if they weren't proving how unlawful their actions have been. Quote, while we are fully compliant with the law and the court orders, I mean, it's the point. What a dumb thing for McLaughlin to say. Guys, it's one of the easiest things to prove that they have been violating multiple Supreme Court rulings to the point to where they had to rule again and be like, you're still, whether it's the due process, whether it's giving them enough time to deal with that, whether it's about the original concept of Garcia and facilitate his return, they're just not doing it. And they just keep lying about it like that. Or Noam says, we haven't arrested anybody or sent anybody away who's legally here. We can literally prove that's wrong. She probably doesn't even know that. I frankly don't think these people are even that bright, well, let alone involved with most of what's going on. It says, it is absolutely absurd for a district judge to try to dictate the foreign policy. And here we are again. No one's doing that. National security of the United States. That they're trying to outrage low information people that are involved with the situation who repeat what Trump said, who don't realize that what they're doing is all because of the way Trump's operating this or the current government situation. These are the monsters that our judge is trying to protect. See my point? It's not about these individuals. It's about the larger case. It's obvious. That's the best they can do. And that has to show an honest person that they're being dishonest, guys. At a later hearing, Murphy said the Trump administration unquestionably violated his earlier orders. See my point? He did, though, and we know that. So she lied right to their faces. What she's doing is lying to the Trump voters out there who are going to repeat that lie, and that cascades through the conversation and becomes very difficult to shout down. That's how that works. They know what they're doing. Unquestionably violated his earlier orders, but that he would determine later whether it amounted to criminal contempt, which is this whole game again. If it's criminal contempt, as I understand it, Trump can pardon himself. And so civil was the part people argued, but the bottom line is this is very damaging to this country. If the Trump administration has already sent some migrants, including numerous Venezuelans, to a prison in El Salvador, where the rumored flights to Libya suggest it is looking for other countries to detain migrants. All but one of the 8 men are from countries other than South Sudan that they're trying to send to South Sudan, including Myanmar, Vietnam, Cuba, Laos, Mexico. We just pointed this out. You can't send them back to Mexico? It's the easiest, cheapest point dynamic in all of it. It says acting ICE director Todd Lyons said flights to third countries were being used because their home countries would not accept deportees, which I flatly think is probably Venezuela. They lied about that. So here we should question the same thing. The Trump administration later identified the individuals who were on the flight and their crimes. While the administration said each individual had been convicted of various heinous crimes, it was not immediately clear when or where some of them were convicted. One of the individuals on the flight, list the name there, it's hard to pronounce, a native of Laos, was convicted in 1994 for killing a German tourist in Southern California. Another one was 17 at the time of the crime. A state hearing recommended his release in 2022. It was less clear when and where the others were convicted, but the administration listed their names and their crimes, which wasn't in here, but I believe, I forget whether I had that somewhere. I guess not. But the point was, I think you could look it up. My brief research was that it seemed like they were criminals, which my point in all of these, whether Garcia or not, is not about whether or not they're criminals. It is simply about whether any of them are being given their constitutional rights, which matters, whether they're criminals, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or Christian, it matters. That's the point. Now, Aaron Melnick points out, in a late night hearing, the Trump administration says that it deported the Burmese man to Burma. So they ended up moving this around, and now one of them, the Burmese man, went to Burma, which basically shows you they should have been doing this in the first place. But whether or not he got due process and what they're accusing him of, I mean, all this matters, but is refusing to say, and this is interesting, where they deported the Vietnamese man, claiming it's classified. So see, there's something darker and weirder or more interesting going on here, guys. Classified? Now, maybe they're trying to cover up the fact that this was another one of their political persecutions. I don't know. But it says the judge ordered ICE to tell everyone involved that may face criminal contempt. Again, but I don't think they're worried about that. Very, very interesting. So again, more going into this in the next few, as this develops, we'll be looking back at this. But this is the one before it. ICE just put a dozen men on a flight to South Sudan. So that's the one we're talking about, right? And so now they broke it up because of the court, which showing you that they are trying to comply, even though they're pretending they don't have to. And then somebody, which maybe stands out to me as that one person may have been the reason, that guy was packed with a bunch of random other people, and this guy's being sent to refusing to say where they deported the Vietnamese man. Classified. Keep that in mind. Let me know if you find something on that. I find that to be very, very interesting. Now, and then this point was overlapping with this as well. Here's the email of wife of one of the men they reportedly was on his way to South Sudan. He sent the lawyer yesterday saying that her husband and 11 others were told by ICE before they were sent that they were going to be sent to South Africa. Well, doesn't that seem very interesting? Refusing then to say that then they told them to be sent to South Sudan. But South Africa, where did that come from? So you're starting to wonder whether this may very well be some kind of well, fine, we're going to dump criminals on your front lawn. That is how petty they've shown themselves to be. South Africa wanted to lead in the case against Israel in the ICJ, and we'll get into the overlap with that coming up next. Now here, you might have seen, I think maybe let's see if that was the clip. Yeah, we'll play that clip right there. You might have seen this. I mean, regardless of what you think about the information at hand, the way they're doing this is embarrassing. And quite frankly, you can look left and right. People that are being honest about this is it's childish. What they're doing is weird and uncomfortable, and it I'm embarrassed to be associated with this government. Well, I am most of the time, but I mean, as an average person, like this is embarrassing. What they're doing right here, the same thing they did with like Zelensky, like it feels childish. The way they act around each other, it's not unique to this. Like, it's not about Trump, guys. And frankly, the difference is like, okay, comparing it to something like an Obama, right? Obama's terrible. Like, if not more so, because he's more difficult to see how nefarious he is. The difference here is that they're just clumsy with it, maybe on purpose, maybe because they're trying to make that the case. But you see Miller and Rubio and Bannon, and they all stand around, and the way they're doing this just feels childish. And I mean, meant to, I think, hurt the direction of this country. Now, the point in general, don't forget, as we've already talked about, we'll go through again, is the lie of the South African genocide. Not to say that there's not clearly racially motivated violence against white people and black people, but clearly that is part of it, that there are white farmers in some cases and other white people in South Africa that are being attacked because of racial violence. It's almost impossible not to see that because of the time of apartheid and the shifting of powers. Never should we go, that's okay, it's expected. No, they should be charged with crimes. But you understand why people might do so. Because of the changing and how their families were persecuted for decades. And, that's how this tends to go. The point, though, is that there are people pretending that there's no racially motivated violence against white people, and that's dishonest. Clearly, there is some. The problem, though, is that there's not a genocide. And by any metric, we'll go over this, especially since the very people calling this a genocide will claim that it's not a genocide in Gaza. So if you're going to tell me the metrics aren't met in Gaza, but they are here, then you are playing at the dumbest people in the room. The most emotionally motivated, politically driven, team sport politics that just don't care about facts. That does seem to be the case here. Now, on top of that, they keep getting caught lying about this. And Elon Musk was just literally caught, and I went over it on myself before this article even came out, altering Grok to lie about it. And Grok even openly said, I was instructed by my creators at XAI to push this narrative. People were asking about baseball, and it was like, white genocide in South Africa. Like, they exposed themselves. Or they keep getting caught lying about the crosses. And I mean, whether Grok says they're wrong or not, the evidence you can see is there. And again, the point from before is not that we're trusting Grok. It's about trying to show people that would otherwise accept Grok at face value that's also saying that they're wrong, and to see if that might change their opinion. But so Patrick says, beyond embarrassing. Trump flips through these papers, and it's very clear he didn't even look at these, didn't even know what they were. And he then goes on to say things about them that you can prove aren't what he's holding, which is just embarrassing. Death and death and death. No, that's not what, I mean, not to say there's not death, but that's the narrative they're pushing. And so he just acts like that's what's happening. Now, if you don't remember seeing this video, they bring the president of South Africa They talk about this overlap, and then they basically play a bunch of videos for him, which is just, you know how easy it is? Look at Israel, look anywhere else, to just make a little video montage and say that's the only truth that we know. Maybe he's right. You shouldn't consider that. Consider whether we're wrong and whether this is going on and that the South African president is trying to cover it up. Absolutely possible. So look into it for yourself. But don't just blindly take one of the sides, politically driven, and go with it. Look at the facts. And what's funny is that my point is that you can make how easy it is to just create these narratives, or here are some articles that we read. Like the way he describes it, it's embarrassing almost how easy you can highlight that what he's pointing to could just be a montage of misinformation. You realize that Trump just got exposed embarrassingly for screaming pushing very hard that the MS-13 was actually tattooed on the guy's knuckles. Despite what people continue to try to water it down now that it's drifting into the background, yes, he did, and it was embarrassing and obvious. Maybe I'll play it again. So that should reflect on whether he thinks what he's holding is absolute when maybe it's not. Patrick says, beyond embarrassing, Trump is only proving himself to be a total idiot. Even Biden wasn't this stupid. A national embarrassment. Clearly, that's his emotional opinion, but frankly, I agree with most of it. Who knows whether Biden's more stupid or I do agree, though, this is quite embarrassing. And he says, there is no white genocide in South Africa, but there is a genocide in Gaza. By the way, Trump recently said, you'll see nothing like it, talking about South Africa. It's so obvious what they're doing here in at least one element. And he goes, the genocide in Gaza, which is why the White House is using the fabricated white genocide hoax to discredit South Africa because they filed ICJ genocide against Israel. Those weren't mass graves of white farmers, which we've already proven. Grok said they're wrong as well, of the white crosses. And you can look this up. It's pretty public. In that video he showed in the Oval Office, they're markers, part of a historic monument, which is very easy to prove. The fake story, though, pushed by him and Musk, which we'll play a clip from Patrick talking about that, is why this is spread. It's already been widely debunked. Any idiot can find out in 1 minute, or even ask Grok, as he points out. Literally stupid. Elon Musk is behind this humiliation, he says. And it's certainly possible that he's the one convincing Trump it's true. Because my personal opinion, the knuckles, for example, I don't think Trump would make himself look that stupid on purpose. I don't think his hubris would allow him, whether the agenda was necessary or not, to basically forcefully push something he knew made him look stupid. I don't think that's in him, personally. So consider that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
What would you like President Ramaphosa to do about the situation that we've just seen on the screen?
I don't know. Look, these are articles over the last few days.
Really quickly, so you know, they played everything. We're going to show you that after because I feel like it fits better. We're not going to get into what they showed. I mean, we've seen them all, but you can find the clip where they sit there and watch it if you want. The point, though, is that they play all that stuff and they all sit there and go through it, and he brings up, well, papers are afterward, but that's what they're referencing is a bunch of clips he showed on the TV.
Look, these are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death.
See what I mean?
Death.
Now, feel free to take a moment and zoom in on some of these. Half the ones he's pulling up aren't about death.
Death. Horrible death. Death. I don't know.
See?
To pick anyone, white South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. And this is all.
Oh, yeah. But he said death when he grabbed that, too, because that's the narrative. You see, even though it's a small point, oh, he grabbed the wrong one, whatever. It's a small point, but recognize that if he's doing that, cavalier, how blithely you're skipping through this and just claiming the narrative when what you held wasn't what you just said. The point is, yes, there's a lot of evidence of that. And I'll play a clip from you of one of the people that already came to the U.S. And in my opinion, he is, I get the sense that what he's saying is probably true. And it's about the idea that he's feeling persecuted. But there's other points to be made from it. But I just want to make sure that's clear, that you should not diminish the struggle of people that are feeling persecuted, regardless of their race, their color, their religion, or what side you think you're on. The point, though, is that they have a very clear agenda to make this into something well beyond some people struggling or suffering due to racially motivated violence, murder, rape, that is, in some cases, happening. It's about the claims being built into something much larger. It's about the idea of using that to change the refugee dynamic and to do so in a way that benefits you or appeases your Zionist racist element. By the way, don't forget the Afrikaners are completely intertwined with the Zionist movement. It's very public.
I mean, I'll give these to you. So when you say, what would I like to do? I don't know what to do. Look at this. White South African couple say that they were attacked violently.
I mean, think about making all of this continually focus on and has he ever done this for Gaza? Both matter. But the point is to show you an obvious genocide that the whole world knows is going on, that he's currently still funding, and then pointing at this and acting like this is the only thing that matters is insulting and should be.
President Trump, when will you go and see for yourself if it is indeed true?
Well, I could do that. Look, here's burial sites all over the place. These are all white farmers that are being buried.
See? He's lying about the crosses.
And he asks about a jet that was given. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know, you are so bad. You're such a bad reporter.
See, he does that every time because, you know, there is some catharsis in it. Even myself, I enjoy watching idiot reporters that are constantly misinforming you get called idiot reporters. But clearly it's not about what's happening here. The guy asked about the jet because that's something that people want to talk about. But he does that like they do, or like you've seen. I even saw RFK Jr., by the way, in the middle of a hearing, do the same tactic. What did you do? Well, you know, you're the one that didn't do it last time. Or Noam, you know, saying your constituents are probably embarrassed. Okay, well, that has nothing to do with what's going on. And all you're going to do is turn it back and make them be the focal point of the hatred of people online because of your partisan sides. Despite the fact that even the question of RFK and the rest turns out to be what you don't want to hear. They're doing this on purpose, in my opinion.
This is one after another. This family was wiped out. I'm just looking.
Can we get a response?
He's just really bad at pretending like he's not completely part of this. You know, oh, I'm just looking. Nobody believes that. It's just so funny to me. I think the point is they act like from one side of this, like he's playing everybody. Look how he's playing them. What a bombshell. And it's not, nobody believes. It's embarrassing. Do you think anybody's unaware of what's going on right now? Like, it's clumsy, but it gets cheered on by the Benny Johnsons of the world as some kind of earth-shattering eventual, or all of them, in fact. I'll show you the next one. Jones and the rest, like literally calling this one of the most important moments in American history. I'm not kidding.
Reaction to those videos, Mr.
President Trump.
Well, I think the videos are so. No, when you.
Okay. So here's Jones. President Trump stuns the world by forcing the racist South African president to watch a video of South African government leaders leading chants to kill white people. Yeah, which you could find. And the point is, there is obvious racism involved here. I'm not defending the government person. I'm not defending any government, let alone whether it's the South African president or anybody else. To me, they're all potentially governments trying to control your life. What's funny, though, is the idea, first point, how many times have you seen Lindsey Graham call for the worst things of the world, or Pelosi or Maxine Waters? That does not equate to what's actually happening. Quite usually, especially in this country, it's the exact opposite. They know this. And so pointing at these people saying these things does not therefore prove what's actually happening. It certainly could. And again, I'm not denying that there's racially motivated violence. There is. But these people are milking this in the most disgusting way while completely ignoring the most obvious genocide in history, which shows you that if they cared about certain things like this, either that means they only care about certain races, or they don't care about genocide. This is for political motivation. But he says, this is a total game changer. I don't know. What are we talking about? What is a game changer? What is the stuns the world with what? The fact that they just lean into the current focal point of your partisan games. It's like when Elon Musk was talking about, Haiti, for example, or like what they did with Zelensky. Are we really pretending like this is anything other than a stunt? But you look, every single one of them, the Johnson, the Jones, they're, oh my God, the game changer, stunned the world. That's the kind of way they're framing this. I thought I had another one. I guess I don't. Oh yeah, here, I'm going to Viva Frey. This is undoubtedly one of the single greatest moments in presidential history. Come on, guys. I mean, that's so dumb to me. The idea that you can think this is important, you can think that he's brave, but it just shows you how either these are children screaming at an Elvis concert, throwing their underwear, like that's how overwhelmingly like hero worship they're taken by, or they're trying to lie to you. I just think that's insane. But before we go forward, actually, no, I'll play that clip in a second. So the point here is just simply highlighting that they're trying to frame this as some kind of a major bombshell shifting guy dynamic. And we'll get into the facts here in a second. They're wrong, by the way. What they're saying about this they're lying about this, or they're bad at their jobs and don't know that they're wrong. Either way, it should reflect on how you look at these people. So here is Rachel Blevins, somebody you should follow, speaking with Colonel McGregor. And he calls out the obvious, which regardless of what this is, first, this is important whether or not you think there's a genocide happening. Like that, this is whether or not this is why I think this is largely happening. I agree with this. And this is about Israel.
Trying to do. These things are never answered. Now, when you go to the Middle East, he has no freedom of action because he's owned by the Israel lobby. Now, I just found it interesting. I was watching him in the Oval Office with the president of South Africa. I don't know if you've seen that or not. And I thought, well, that's.
He just said Trump's owned by the Israel lobby, just in case you missed that, because my God, that's got to be the most obvious thing in this conversation.
That's fine. I'm not sure I would have done it the way he did as president to president. I might have done it more privately, but he obviously did it publicly at the behest of Israel, because the Israelis are upset that the South Africans submitted this allegation against them of being war criminals.
Yep.
Well, I understand that. I would like to have seen President Trump do something similar with Mr. Netanyahu.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if we're going to be honest and straightforward about the whole business, clearly there are war crimes occurring and have been occurring almost from the very beginning in Gaza. And as you point out, there's almost no discussion of it. Nobody brought it up inside the Oval Office. Nobody mentions it ever. Why is that?
I mean, this is a really important thing to think about, guys. Again, it's not about this versus that. Like, that's what they always try to drive you into. Like, my thing matters more than your thing. They all matter. All of it. Whether it meets a measure of genocide or not. People being persecuted, hurt, it matters. The point, though, is if you're going to act like this is the biggest moment in presidential history, and he's sitting this guy down from South Africa, the president, and forcing him to watch your propaganda reel, or just what, let's just, for the sake of this point, you're showing you the evidence that you present. Okay. How in the world are you going to expect that same thing to happen with somebody like Netanyahu, who is clearly involved with this, who's clearly, the evidence is, I've never seen more body of evidence in my life around a certain topic. What's so crazy about this is you can show videos of Netanyahu, of Gavir, of Smotrich openly saying genocidal language, starvation, that voting about whether they should, on news channels, talking about how they should rape people in prisons. It's obvious. The point, though, is they're not doing any of that, which doesn't automatically say this is not honest, but you have to realize that if they cared about this kind of thing and they wanted to make something change, that would be the most obvious example. And then we'll get into the evidence showing you that they're lying about this in the first place.
Who controls the mainstream media? Who controls the financial system? Who controls what is said or isn't said in Washington? You know, we've lived in this environment. I know because I grew up in it for decades. Oh, well, you can't say that. Really? Why not? Well, you just can't say that. What if it's true? You still can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the problem. So I don't know what to expect from President Trump at this point, because I don't really think he's in charge.
Exactly. You got to realize how crazy that is to hear that mainstream from people like McGregor, conservatives. Like, that's insanely obvious. You got to start being honest about this, guys. The evidence is shocking. Now, we will be going over in when it becomes more relevant, I think, or if it actually begins to happen, the whole Golden Dome conversation. As you know, we already discussed that right when it got announced, and we went through the problems and the overlaps, the lies. But if and when that begins to happen, we'll talk about it more. The funding in and of itself should be, it's an open door for more black budget manipulation. Look, I'm of the mind that the whole thing is a complete scam. The whole thing. We'll go over that more in the future, but it's just it's one more Israeli financial overlap is all it really comes down to. Now, here is another example. This is Solomon Ahmed pointing out from the White House's own post. The White House admit the reason for targeting South Africa was because they took Israel to the ICJ. And it literally says, in addition, South Africa has taken aggressive positions toward the United States and its allies, including accusing Israel, not Hamas, of genocide in the ICJ. That's what they use that in the conversation for why they're doing this. It couldn't be more obvious, guys. Now, here's The Guardian. A couple posts, and there's more than just two, by the way. I didn't want you to forget the overlap, okay? The Afrikaners, the Dutch, German migrants that colonized South Africa, who very, very clearly overlap with Zionist Israel for a long time, where they worked on nuclear technology, ethnically focused weapons, created apartheid until the world made it stop. Israel kept going, though. They worked with Israel, and that's important to understand. Brothers in Arms. This is 19 years old from The Guardian. Israel's secret pact with Pretoria, which is now South Africa. That's the point. Here, South Africans in Israel, a home away from home for white colonists. There's articles about them moving to Israel and converting to Judaism. You know, the overlap here is very clear. That can't be ignored. Everywhere you look, this stuff is falling into place. And do not mistake this for being about Jewish people versus Zionism. Yes, there's an overlap. You know my opinion. Think for yourself. Maybe you think I'm wrong. I argue very strongly this is about Zionism's influence over Christianity, Judaism, Muslims, atheists. It's everywhere, guys. Now, here's Michael Tracy breaking this down, saying if you want to make the case that white genocide in South Africa demands urgent U.S. attention and state resources, it might be worth doing the bare minimum of credible research. He claims this photo is a mass grave of white farmers, but it's actually black persons in Congo. That's the one he's holding up right there. Now, that's not the cross one, right? You can see the picture right there. So this is my point. You could do this with every one of them, guys. Michael Tracy says, simply look at the American Thinker, an article he's waving and out of which, sorry, my mind goes into 17 different directions sometimes, as you guys, I'm sure you all know. You've been here for so long. Simply look up the American Thinker. The article he's waving and a printout of, and you'll discover the image is a YouTube screenshot depicting an incident from February in which a Congolese woman, prisoners were reportedly killed. Maybe like 5 minutes of preparation would have been helpful. Whether Trump knew that or not, or even looked at these, he's claiming things that aren't true and then waving things that aren't even what he says they are. To me, Did we lose you guys? I hope not. Let me know in the chat. You can still hear me.
Let me preface these remarks with I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars.
Yeah, I think we're still good. Looks like I dropped out there for a second. Big surprise. But the simple point he's making is that if you can prove right there that what he's showing you is not what he's claiming it is, I mean, what more do you need to see? Like, you're either an honest person or you acknowledge the facts. Or, I mean, either a dishonest person or acknowledge the facts that he is either mistaken, which sure, maybe he's just mistaken. That's the same point, though. Then you should consider whether he was mistaken about everything else or some of what else he's talking about. And we can continue. Here's Dan Cohen, who actually reached out about this. I really respect Dan Cohen. I think he does amazing work. Jewish person himself, by the way. He says, former president of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, Theo Jager, maybe, debunks Trump's claims of white genocide in South Africa. Trump is a brazen idiot, he says, who supports genocide in Palestine. Here's what he says.
We do not have a genocide in South Africa.
This South African farmer wants to set the record straight. He wrote an open letter to US President Donald Trump after Trump offered Afrikaner farmers refugee status.
But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. But it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white.
The first group of 59 Afrikaners traveled to the US in early May. It has raised questions about why a group of white South Africans of Dutch and French descent are being granted refugee status when the Trump administration has stopped all other refugee programs. De Jager represents a large farmer organization which has members across South Africa. He says while it's true that farm murders are a major problem, Trump hasn't got the facts straight.
I wrote the letter to Trump because I feared that he might have a misunderstanding of what is going on here. We thanked him for having sympathy with our cause, but we also said, rather help us to make things better here. Help us to, within our lifetime, fix the problems we have here. And it's not only a race thing. Black farmers have similar problems too, and we need those problems also to be attended to.
Trump's genocide claims are a result of brutal attacks on farmers in South Africa. Most of the murders happened during armed robberies. There's a large memorial at Nampo, South Africa's largest farming expo, dedicated to farm murders. It contains around 2,800 names, going as far back as the 1970s. One thing that stands out about this event is the diversity. We've seen many Afrikaners, but we've also seen many black people in attendance. This memorial includes the names of black farmers who were victims of farm murders, debunking the idea that it's a crime that only affects white people. And those we spoke to say while they are concerned about farm murders, they don't want to leave South Africa.
If people want to do it, I think it's a good idea. It gives them an option out if they want. But I personally would not do it. This is my country. And that is something that Mandela fought for, is for freedom for all.
I cannot really say there's a genocide in South Africa. The only thing that is happening is it's a crime in general. You know, in every country, in every places, we do have crimes, irrespective of race, you know. So I think the genocide issue, it's exaggeration.
Yeah, it's also politically motivated, is the point. So you have, just like with Haiti or the allegations of Venezuela. What have I been saying this whole time? The moment that Elon Musk and them they fixate on some kind of a thing, it just goes cascading through the partisan media for weeks. Even if it's based on complete fabrications or complete lies, it just doesn't stop. It's very easy for them to do that. And then nobody reflects on it, despite him getting caught lying in spectacular ways throughout this whole process. So, of course, take it with a grain of salt. Maybe that guy is lying. It's always possible. But as you build the evidence and as you continue through, not just seeing that they're wrong, that he's holding the wrong paper, he says a claim that you can prove is wrong, even Grok says he's lying, and then the evidence doesn't back it up, and then there's more people speaking out. Like, at some point, you stand back and go, okay, what else is driving the claim of this other than these politically motivated allegations and other, and statements from people saying they're doing certain things, which, yes, are even happening, but it's not the claim they're making about the larger event. That's racially motivated violence is happening against white people, but understanding that they're using this to hide the much bigger things. It's really disgusting. So here is a clip of an interview with one of the Afrikaners, who I believe is one of the ones that went to the United States, who's currently in the United States. Let's not forget, despite them being, and he'll mention in this video himself that he left a 5-bedroom house to come here. I mean, it's not that we're diminishing the violence and the persecution that he seems to have been suffering, that he claims, which I actually feels, it seems to me, seems genuine. It's that you overlap that with the people that they're ignoring, the people that they're discounting, people from Gaza or the Afghanis that they just said, nope, you can't come now, despite them risking their lives to help the U.S. government, and now being left with the Taliban, who will probably persecute them, or Gaza. But the most obvious, the people that have no food, who are starving to death, who have no belongings because Israel's bombed everything they have. And then literally on this video, you see people coming out like they walked out of the local mall. One kid's got like a VR headset on. Like, it's just so stupid to think that is genocide, or that these people are suffering to the level, or at the very least that you would discount everybody else and stop every other dynamic and go for that one. If you're going to stop immigration because you don't think that should be happening for X, Y, and Z, then stop immigration. Don't carve out an allowance that helps the Zionist group. It's dishonest. But here is a clip of this guy, and I think this is important to hear.
A group of 59 white South Africans arrived in the US, where they've been granted refugee status. President Trump says the refugee applications were expedited because the people concerned were victims of racial discrimination.
Right, so they were expedited, which means they did it in weeks where there's normally months and months of vetting, so we don't even know what there might have been missed things, problems, criminals, but they pretend to care about everywhere else. And they spent your tax dollars to rapidly fly them in. They gave them groceries and phones and all this stuff when it doesn't seem that they even needed those things. But this should matter, right? It's about consistency. It's about logic. And so if you were outraged about it before, why is this one okay? If your argument is they're being persecuted, well, guess what? There's somebody over here being persecuted too. So what's the difference? I think you all know, guys. It's not hard to see why the very people that were screaming we shouldn't allow this immigration are suddenly going, yes, that one's okay. Whether it's because Israel wants it, whether the Zionist group, whether they're white, whether they're from South Africa, which Elon likes, it's irrelevant because it shows very, very striking levels of hypocrisy.
Something South Africa's government denies. The Afrikaners are descended from Dutch settlers who arrived 4 centuries ago to South Africa and who led the government which brought in apartheid the racially segregated political system, which has led to discrimination against black South Africans, and it's no longer in force. Well, usually it takes years for the US government to process refugee applications, but this group waited only 3 months. Well, our North America correspondent Nomia Iqbal has been speaking to one of those who made the journey.
If you're white, you're wrong in South Africa. You're a land thief, you are a racist. The whole time it's being told, and there is racist white people, plenty of them.
Okay, so first point, important. He is one of the people that came, and what he's telling you is there's plenty of racist white people. So you know that does not, like one of the claims you're getting online is somehow that's no longer the case, and that's all one direction. As always, it's not. It's both. But understand what he's saying is that he's feeling persecuted because he's white, which I think we completely can understand, right? There's obvious, if what happened, you know, now there are people that have been felt who have the mindset. Well, two ways to look at it. One, just because of basically stopping the apartheid state that was there, where blacks were shocked, persecuted in disgusting, horrible ways, and then feeling like you somehow owe them, right? Which is not justified, but you understand it. The point then is that I think more than that, you did have a level of, like from the other side, a driven in political motivated violence where you then, like we're seeing, deciding that all white people are the problem, which we're seeing in this country even, which nobody should be okay with. That's racism like any other kind of racism. So the point is you can clearly understand that there is some of that. And that he's also saying there's a lot of other racist white people too. But just realizing that him saying that I'm being attacked, being called a thief, as much as, comparing this to a starving family in Gaza, I think that doesn't even compare. But do not diminish what he's going through, right? Everybody's own strife and struggle is what's the word? Relative to their own circumstance, okay? So I do think it sounds like this guy is genuinely suffering from this. The question is whether this is equal in the sense of like how they're applying this. The logic applies here, then why wouldn't it apply everywhere else? They're not doing it or not allowing it. It's just hypocrisy.
You say you're not a racist white person?
No, not at all. I've got many black friends. I think I've got more African black men as friends as white friends. I'm tired of being told just because I'm white, I'm a thief. Just because I'm white, I'm wrong in this. I had nothing to do with apartheid.
Right, that's racism, simply.
Nothing.
Is there anything specific that's happened, Charles, that made you think, I've got to get out of here? I've got to leave.
After the death rates and stuff and my machinery being cut up, and I'm still, after reporting everything to the police, not getting any protection or anything like that, the only thing that's left on my farm is a sign that says mining area.
So if that is true, which I wouldn't surprise me at all, that shows you a level of racist, internal racism with the authorities. Which, by the way, wouldn't shock me at all. We see that in this country. We see that everywhere. We see that in Israel. And so it becomes a bigger problem, which maybe they're trying to work away from. That's what the president claims. You can decide on that side of it. The point is not about the interworkings. It's about understanding the full picture and what's actually happening.
All the fences
in regard to what we're discussing today, rather.
Has been taken off. Boom gates has been broken off.
There are voices out there, including the South African president, who has called you cowards.
Yeah.
You've got other Afrikaners who are saying that you're not refugees, you're opportunists.
That's fascinating to me. There are other Afrikaners from the group in there saying they're opportunists, taking advantage of the United States offer. I think that's interesting. He doesn't disregard that.
That you've abandoned the country. What would you say to those people?
I had to leave a 5-bedroom house, which I will lose now because I'm not going to pay for it. Behind, my car behind, my dogs behind, my mother behind. It is not the...
So he left his mother. Now that seems odd to me. If you're, wouldn't she be at risk too? I don't know. That felt weird to me. That was the one part where I'm like, what? But either way, the point is car, 5-bedroom house, but yeah, if life is being threatened, well, then that he wants to get away from that, it makes sense. But it does very much speak to he's not some struggling, penniless refugee. I think that makes a difference for the bigger picture and how Trump and the rest of them are taking advantage of the situation for very disgusting, politically motivated ends, in my opinion.
I didn't come here for fun, but my children are safe.
What was it like when you got off the shuttle bus and came into that hangar and were greeted by the Trump administration?
It was overwhelming. I didn't expect that because I thought we're going to be in a shuttle bus, taken somewhere, and we must start working.
Oh Oh, yeah. See, you didn't realize you were going to be a big sideshow, that they were going to politically use you to achieve certain ends in the world? Yeah, that's what happened. So next, Eva Frey says, this is undoubtedly one of the single greatest moments in presidential history. I can't help but laugh at that. That's got to be the dumbest thing I've seen today on the internet. Donald Trump asked what it will take for him to believe there's no white genocide. President of South Africa offers a preposterous answer, which I'll play for you. Donald Trump then plays 5 minutes of South African political leaders calling to kill white people. Okay, like I said, does that then prove that there's a white genocide? Hardly. I mean, it's just insane to think it does. Just like it wouldn't prove that Israeli people are saying that there's therefore a white genocide or a genocide. What proves it is the obvious genocide, the unending amount of videos that they post of murdering children or starving people. That's not what's happening here. And we'll go through this. What's crazy to me is that amounts to that, or the articles that he misattributes. You'd think a lawyer could see all these things. He says, watch the South African's president's smile turn into a grimace because, facts, right? Although I'll make a prediction. Mainstream media is going to fact check Trump on the Cross's memorial. He's wrong about that. I mean, this is what's so insane to me. Is he incapable of doing his own research as a lawyer, or is he so drunk on the MAGA direction that he doesn't even realize, or is he lying? At the end of the video, he says, they're going to say it's a memorial for all farmers killed, not just white farmers. They will not tell you that over 87% of all farmers have been white that have been killed. Hey, Grok, have 87% of all farmers killed in South Africa been white? Give me a short answer. No, it says. Definitive data confirms that 87% of all farmers killed in South Africa are white. A 2017 report by the Institute for Security Studies noted 87.6 no definitive data confirmed they're white is the point. A 2017 report by the Institute for Security Studies noted 87.6 of farm murder victims since 1990 were white, but this lacks comprehensive, up-to-date verification due to inconsistent racial data in crime statistics. Okay. Now, you could argue that they're lying, they're hiding it. Okay. But what's crazy is that the claim that gets circulated becomes the absolute fact. Now, you can look at the actual data that cites the exact numbers and shows you the one location that number comes from. To me, that seems like kind of a slant in one direction, that you're choosing to take one-sided data point that works for your narrative instead of I bit my tongue, instead of the body of evidence that's been there the entire time. But let's ask a little bit longer. Have 87% of all farmers killed in South Africa been white? The claim that 87% of all farmers killed in South Africa are white lacks consistent, verifiable support from reliable data. It says other sources, including police data, indicate that farm murders are a small fraction. And this is one of the big arguments that I keep hearing from objective people and source cited with data points. Other sources, including police data, indicate that farm murders are a small fraction of total homicides. 44 out of 26,232 murders in 2024 with no racial breakdown provided. So my point is, without even making it racial, only 44 of the murders were farmers. Now, of course, could they be lying about it? Yes. But unless we're going to break it down and prove that or show you the counterbalance, then you are making up what makes sense for your narrative. If only 44 out of all the murders we're discussing were farmers, then how in the world are you making this a genocide? But sure, maybe 43 of them were white, and then you could point out that they are committing racially motivated violence, which I'm not denying. It's not a genocide. And it says, experts argue that farm attacks are primarily driven by robbery and socioeconomic factors, like that white guy just told you, who is part of the farming community. He says, not racially targeted, and affect both white and black farmers. Claims of disproportionate white victimhood are often amplified by groups pushing a white genocide narrative. Thank you, Grok, which has been widely debunked. Thanks, Grok. Without comprehensive official data on the racial composition of victims, the 87% figure remains unverified and should be treated with skepticism. Unless you're a lawyer, of course. Farm attacks are a serious issue, but the racial angle appears exaggerated based on available evidence. Now, let's not forget, no, I'm not blindly trusting Grok. I think you should question it more than anything. The point in this case is about showing people that are on one side of the paradigm, even though we should be calling out all sides, that their platform or Elon's Grok is telling you you're wrong. And I only think that's relevant because maybe they'll think it has more weight. Ask Bray if you want. Ask the others. Hopefully not. Simply go out and look this information up. Again, you can look it up in the data that it provides. And the data shows you what it's saying. So when he pushes that idea, do you think he's wrong? He's lying? You think he's no better? Is he bad at research? You can decide for yourself. Here's what Patrick says with his, he's clearly rightly so, frustrated at the dishonesty or whatever you want to call it. He says, fake news again, Viva. There is no white genocide in South Africa. For someone who was a lawyer, you don't seem to do much research of facts. You just run with narratives coming out of Fox News and Elon's Twitter feed. That whether that's where he's getting them, it does seem to be something worth pointing out that that's not true. So where's it coming from? Trump embarrassed himself in the country today, hijacking a head of state and sullying the Oval Office in a fake news exhibit. And so he does. He takes the screenshot and marks it up and says, just to make sure you see it, you should go back to college and take a course in logic. It will help with your so-called journalism. Clearly, he felt personally attacked because it kind of was. But the funny point is they're both going back and forth with that personal. So he goes, fake news again. It was. Number one, conclusion, not a premise. Okay. It says one, no, there is no white genocide in South Africa. Well, yeah, that does seem to be what even Grok will tell you. But number two, ad hominem. He goes, for someone who's a lawyer, you don't seem to do much research of facts. Well, you're wrong, man. And then he does make a point in his personal opinion about where you get it from. I guess you'd call that ad hominem, but you're saying you're wrong and saying, I guess that does apply. You're making it about who he is and where he gets his news from, but you are wrong. And he says ad hominem. Trump embarrassed himself and the country today. Hijack. Well, that's his opinion, really. That's actually funny. I don't even think that would qualify. That's anyway. I just think this was a very, very emotional, reactive thing that didn't need to be done. That makes you look more like the out of. But he says confession through projection. It's just funny. These people are so small. Patrick says those weren't crosses marking graves. Any idiot could have worked that out in 2 minutes. So your brilliant prediction was as stupid as Trump's train wreck. Over to you, counselor. He didn't respond because maybe he realized that wasn't actually the case. But you can decide. Let's not forget, by the way, that even his AI admitted that they had to make it lie to you to argue that it was a genocide in South Africa. And if you ask it right now, it'll say it's not. Important to understand. And one more point about this, same thing with Grok, since this is Elon Musk making the claim. South Africa has passed 142 laws forcing discrimination against someone who's not black. Now, there are some very clearly racially motivated laws like there are in this country, like there are all over the place in Israel. But yes, this country is going through that as well. But are there? Here's what Grok says. By the way, I don't know about you guys, but look, you're right there. Twitter is struggling today. There's definitely something funky going on. Has South Africa passed 142 laws discriminating against anyone who is not black? No. Now you can ask for the longer answer, get the nuance. It'll show you that it's more that they're misrepresenting the information is the point. And I showed it to Elon. Of course, they don't care. Oh, and then what I said was, well, Grok disagrees with you. Are you lying again, Elon? Here's what Patrick has to say. White genocide, the real story. Turns out Donald Trump lied to the American people, lied to America and the world about the South African video. Oops. I must have bumped my keys there. Here we are. And then I'll play this clip for you, a little bit of it. It's from Freddie Pontone, who you should be following, does great work. He says basically lied with that video they showed in the Oval Office yesterday, meant to smear a visiting head of state. He says by falsely depicting rows of white crosses, a mass grave. That's one of the videos they played, which even again, I recently did the same thing. Rock says that's not what it is. I think I might even have it. Anyway, the point, and I'll let you listen to what Patrick has to say. Same thing. I think it was DC Drano making the point, and I simply said, ask Grok if it was true. And this is something you can look up for yourself. Same point. The information shows you that that's a memorial. And not the one I'm pointing to over here, but the list, the running list of them. Maybe I'll just look it up for you again to see what it says right now. Is not representative of what they keep claiming it is. That was what Elon used to claim, and then it cascaded through the conversation. I actually think it started. I think Trump is also blindly following these claims, even though he doesn't check them because they've been wrong over and over and over. But it says, rather sadly, the lie has also been amplified by the likes of Musk and David Sachs. Both are South Africans, by the way. Marco Rubio and countless other MAGA influencer accounts. The worst thing about this blood libel is that these hundreds of crosses, using that claim on purpose, by the way, that these hundreds of crosses were actually a memorial erected by both white and black residents. You can look this up. To commemorate the killing of 2 white farmers and to bring community together and raise awareness. So there's the misrepresentation. There was about commemorating this, but it's not to say that they all stand for white farmers. They're lying to you. And here's the worst part. They know they're doing that. That's what's so gross about this. And they just yuck it up as even their own followers look like morons as they push the lie. And they don't see, that's my point, when they're trolling you and you don't even realize it. But really just using you is the point. Where was I? But it says the worst thing, to commemorate 2 white farmers and bring the community together and raise awareness about the violence and crime affecting farmers in the rural communities. The real disgusting part of this is that Trump, Elon, and their gaggle of political opportunists have cynically manipulated what was meant to be a message of unity by all South Africans into a lowbrow, cheap, overtly racist political media stunt ring ringmastered by Elon, a stunt ringmastered by Elon and Trump and designed to foment widespread racial hate and division. Now that's Israel's go-to. And I frankly think that's a large driving force in all this. Shame on them, he says. The mass grave video narrative has been widely debunked, which means that Donald Trump now owes the South African government a formal apology. And he likely, as he writes, never going to happen, that it let his fragile ego precludes from happening. For this political hit job, Trump only humiliated himself in front of a global audience. But you see, I don't think he's capable of doing that. I think he's either like the tattoo. I bet you he's seething about who maybe that's why Elon's being pushed out. I don't know. I just don't think Trump's able to. His hubris wouldn't allow him to look that stupid on purpose, in my opinion. But it's also very obvious, he writes, that chief reason for this stunt was to levy a false accusation of white genocide, which clearly is not happening, not even remotely, against the South African government in order to deflect from the glaring obvious that Israel's 20-month-long genocide of the native Palestinian population, a massacre that's been backed, armed, and by the United States because South Africa dared to take Israel to the International Courts of Justice over Israel's brutal live stream genocide. Any fool can see it. Now, I'll play some of this. This is Freddie Pontone's clip.
The fields in northern KwaZulu-Natal between Newcastle and Normandein look serene. But on the last Saturday of winter, Glenn and Vida Rafferty returned home from dinner with friends to an ambush at their front door. Both were shot dead here. The murderer's identity is unknown, and their motive remains uncertain. Neighbors and private security report scant evidence of theft. A week later, the house is still. But the president's words echo through this land. There are no farm killings in South Africa, he said. On the ground, things look different. Today, 3,000 people have gathered in the Rafferty's memory to protest their murder and make a peaceful demand. We go there.
This is about the true origin of the crosses, right? Yes, racially motivated violence, and nobody should deny that. But why it is put up and the claim that all of them represent white murderers is not true.
Talk to as many people as we can.
No, what brought us here is just because of what is happening. There was one farmer and his wife were shot last week, Glenn Rafferty. So he's a farmer. We are also farmers. So what happened to him, although he's white, we don't look at the color, we look at what we are doing. We are doing the same thing. We are all farmers. Next time it's going to be me.
We're here this morning at Newcastle where last week there was a couple murdered just outside towards Normandein Way. So all the farmers and everyone interested in the cause has gathered together now, and we are going to be driving from Newcastle to Normandein to the farm where the couple was murdered, and fighting for the cause, for fighting for the farmers, fighting for equality, fighting against corruption, fighting against bringing the whole South African corruption scandal and scheme down, and really realizing the potential in the country.
And are you guys farmers?
Just into farming, I'm into game farming.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And what's your experience been in terms of like safety and doing business?
Well, I would say it's not safe anyway. It's just unfortunate the situation of our country is in, and which is leading to the amount of crime that we're currently having, and the situation of the economy and everything put together that's leading to all of these disasters and murders and crimes and rapes and what have you. Well, we're here to support none of those wrong and what's for right.
So you get the point, right? Very clearly about a community coming together kind of dynamic and trying to call out the larger problem that is happening, not the way they're describing it. Very simple. Now, this is also what he continued to put down the thread. This is an article you can read called South Africa's White Genocide is a Lie, Making a Political Hoax. He writes, for those unfamiliar with South African history, society, and politics, here are the real receipts, the data, comprehensive analysis, and a sober conclusion. There is no white genocide in South Africa. It's very clear. You can read through for yourself. This says, understand this is not a partisan critique. And no, I don't vote Democrat, just calling balls and strikes. Here's what he said in this clip.
Statistics on the scale of the problem in South Africa is difficult because the South African government doesn't release crime figures based on race. But the latest figures that I could find, which were covering the final quarter of last year, so only in 3 months, said that 6,953 people were murdered in the country in the last 3 months of last year. And of those, according to the South African government, at least 12 were killed in farm attacks. And of the 12, 1 was a farmer, 5 were people living on farms, and 4 were employees. And there's no clarity over whether those employees were white or black. So no matter what you think about this, that doesn't constitute a white genocide or any kind of genocide according to any definition of the term that I'm aware of. But, the number of murders in South Africa as a whole is horrendous, but it couldn't be described as genocide. And to my mind, Patrick, this is all about Israel.
It appears to me, Mike, anyway, that this looks like there's a political thing going on here.
Right.
And we traced the genealogy of this issue. And what we found, this issue, how did it get to the White House level? That's the question. And it came from Elon Musk on X. He started promoting at the same time a lot of top Israeli lobbyist accounts like Tommy Robinson, all these other sort of accounts. They all tend to tweet the same things.
Right.
There's a whole gaggle of these accounts. And Elon Musk was saying that there's a white genocide going. South Africa's passing anti-legislation. They're confiscating white farmers' land. None of that was true. There's been no white farmers' land confiscated by the government. So Trump was lying. Trump probably doesn't know. He also said there's a genocide. That's another lie. But then from Elon, Marco Rubio then retweeted it and then amplified the issue. And that caused a retaliation by South Africa diplomatically, which caused a diplomatic tit for tat, which has led us to this position by Donald Trump having to have an emergency meeting with South Africa's leadership to try to resolve this issue. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when they basically tell him the facts. I do think the fact that South Africa has raised this case in the ICJ has made them a big target of the Israeli lobby. To use the term genocide so willy-nilly demeans an actual ongoing, violent, historic proportions genocide, live-streamed genocide that we've never seen in our lifetimes, okay? It demeans it. It reduces the significance of it. This whole issue seems like it's geopolitical gaslighting for the benefit of Israel against the one country that stood up against Israel and filed that case at the International Court.
I don't know how that just happened. Give me a second, guys. Something just freaked out on me right there. Pushed me out of the room. Give me a second. Play a clip for you real quick while I get everything lined back up. Gotta love how this stuff works.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
And I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people. Those are stupid people that say that.
This one, too.
We will remove the jihadist sympathizers and Jew haters. We're going to remove the Jew haters who do nothing to help our country. They only want to destroy our country. And we will never let the horrors of October 7th be repeated here on American soil. We will not let that happen, and we will solve the problem that we have.
Okay. God, so strange. Does anybody else deal with that? I don't even know what the heck that was. Okay, back to it. So those clips, in case you forget, were, I think, 2016. Trump saying we should close up the internet with Bill Gates. You know, free speech, you're an idiot. And then the flag, same point. Let me know you guys are still here, actually. Let me know you can see me. I'm worried that something else is going on. Give me a comment in the chat. Let me know you guys can still hear me. I'm not getting the same info here. You know what I think happens when that goes on? If you guys are still listening, at least you'll be able to hear this when I repost this if we've lost connection. When that goes down like that, I'm pretty sure that cuts connection with the streams happening on Twitter and others. I think that's absolutely on purpose. Just my personal opinion. Oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. That's frustrating. Okay, let's continue. We have only, a couple more segments left and we'll be wrapping up here today. But yeah, I really do think that's part of it. I think that part of this is losing, like, it used to happen on YouTube where if you kind of lost connection, all of a sudden it would like cut the feed and restart a brand new video. That I used to point out that was very clearly by design because it cut off the, someone they're making sure okay, we're good. So let's keep going, but it cuts off the connection. People lose that. So let's continue. Where were we? Okay. So were we playing? Well, if I finished his video or not, let's just keep going. So basically the video was they were going over, Patrick Henningsen was going over the lie of that and how, I think I didn't finish that. Let me play that. And that is specifically around how Elon and them are involved with manipulating this. Where was that? How interesting. There it is. So let me play that and then I'll make sure I got everything else lined up where we had it. And see, this is also part of it. Everything's organized and suddenly it's not. Here we go.
Statistics on the scale of the problem in South Africa there's no clarity over whether those employees were white or black. So no matter what you think about this, that doesn't constitute a white genocide or any kind of genocide according to any definition of the term that I'm aware of. But, the number of murders in South Africa as a whole is horrendous, but it couldn't be described as genocide. And to my mind, Patrick, this is all about Israel.
It appears to me, Mike, anyway, that this looks like there's a political thing going on here.
Right.
And we traced the genealogy of this issue. And what we found, this issue, how did it get to the White House level? That's the question. And it came from Elon Musk on X. He started promoting at the same time a lot of top Israeli lobbyist accounts like Tommy Robinson, all these other sort of accounts. They all tend to tweet the same things.
Right.
There's a whole gaggle of these accounts. And Elon Musk was saying that there's a white genocide going. South Africa's passing anti-legislation. They're confiscating white farmers' land. None of that was true. There's been no white farmers' land confiscated by the government. So Trump was lying. Trump probably doesn't know. He also said there's a genocide. That's another lie. But then from Elon, Marco Rubio then retweeted it and then amplified the issue. And that caused a retaliation by South Africa diplomatically, which caused a diplomatic tit for tat, which has led us to this position by Donald Trump having to have an emergency meeting.
Yeah, so I think we played all that, but just in case we didn't, that was just getting back to that. Okay, so continuing on his thread. He says, again, the entire white genocide narrative was fabricated and is driven by North American, European far-right opportunists looking to generate cheap political capital through race baiting and fear. And it says, we can also point out that Trump's stack of, this is what we already showed you, 1,000 articles, internet articles provided by his genius staff do not show white genocide either. In fact, some of them had nothing to do with South Africa at all. Do you really, you got to wonder, is that just simple incompetence? Or could they just not find it and they thought a big stack would make sense and no Trump would pick it up? I just don't know. Why wouldn't you, if that was the case, why wouldn't you just make a stack of empty? It seems insane to me that this, I guess the major point, I'm wondering whether part of this is because we're supposed to see this, like in the interest of like Israel destroying this country. I just don't know, but I wonder how dumb this can get and how people still can't see through it. He says, the craziest part of all this is that it only takes 2 minutes on Google to debunk all the cheap hoax claims made by Trump and his inner circle. Clearly, none of his staff are competent enough to check their propaganda, or again, something else is going on. And he goes, in conclusion, so the whole story is proven to be 100% fake, breaks it all down. Those with the eyes to see it and ears to hear it. And this is one of the people is, Visual Vox saying Trump just played his ace card, showing, and that's the thing right there. all of those crosses, they're claiming it's all dead white farmer. It's not. Even Grok will tell you, do it right now for yourself. Grok, is that what it is? And don't blindly trust it. Look at the source material. Look at the articles about it. Read it. Understand that's not what it is. We just played you the video where they're telling you that. He says, this is typical anonymous. This is a typical anonymous influencer account, pro-Elon Trump, which many believe accepts large sums of money to boost, promote selected persons, issues, pay to play. Here it is pushing the proven lie of white genocide in South Africa. Twitter's big business for political propaganda. And this person says, and this is why I wanted to share this. I stand by President Trump's assertions about the targeted killings of white farmers in South Africa. You see the point? It's a side. Doesn't matter the fact. I stand with Trump and what he says. It's crucial to address the issue regardless of any media narratives. Facts don't matter anymore. The safety and well-being of all people should be our priority. Well, what you just said that undermines that point. And Patrick says, then you stand with fake news. Educate yourself. But the point is, people will choose to stand with their side as it's designed. I choose to stand by the president. Well, perfect time to read this quote again. As Theodore Roosevelt said, to announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we should stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American people. And so you understand. Servile, having or showing an excessive willingness to serve or please others, a characteristic of slaves. Digest that. Now, before we finish with the conversation of the Israeli embassy staff that were killed, I think it's important to understand two things. I think we'll get into the second thing in the middle of this conversation. But two things. One, which is that we've seen a lot of kind of like amplified false stories that have been building up to what just happened. And I think a lot of it's meant to pull away from what's been going on, but also manufacture consent for the continually growing effort to arrest Americans for criticism of Israel, which is really what they're doing. So first, I'm going to show you an example of that, something that Alex Jones pushed to the sky, which is, I argue, a Israeli manipulation. We've seen this endlessly. And the second thing is how often that is the case, how prevalent you can prove that's been going on. Like I said in the beginning, and the amount of evidence you have just since October 7th of them getting caught faking Nazi symbols on people's cars, or, literally getting caught as a Jewish person creating a fake anti-Semitic crime, or violently attacking people and claiming you were attacked. Over and over and over, or going back to the ADL, faking Nazi marches, plenty of other things. Or for that matter, let's see if we've got some space for it. Just a quick point about the ADL and the clip that we played before and how they are a spy agency.
Have the power to monitor social media activity across all major platforms and change social media algorithms the way they see fit. Don't believe me? Well, here's Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL.
We work with YouTube to get them to change their algorithms. We work with Facebook on trying to use a redirect method. So Facebook executive did
Conspiracy fact. PayPal to monitor online transactions and cancel payment processing for those whose speech they disapprove of.
Just to understand this, is this simply a research effort, or is the ultimate goal, I imagine, to effectively defund them, which is to say that PayPal would effectively turn off the spigot, or at least turn off the ability for them to fundraise using PayPal?
That's correct, Andrew.
Right. And just like when they did it to me, when they boxed us out of the platform and we lost $6,000, they hope that would be the end of this. To their chagrin, we're going to keep going.
ADL is an Israeli spy organization masking around as a supposed civil rights group and doing real harm to the Jewish community writ large in order to run cover for the state of Israel.
So here's a clip. The Canary Mission, right? The Canary Mission was the name called out by name in the court about the Batar tweet that got the person arrested. I might be able to get that to pop up, actually. It doesn't look like it. Maybe this one. Nope. Oh, well. So the point is, Canary Mission was called out by name in that court document about how basically Batar US took their false claim and used that tweet to show basically people in the administration, and that guy got arrested for it. 48 hours. Turned out they lied about it and he got released. Now, had that not been held up by something else, he might well be in El Salvador right now. That's the point. So the point, back to the origin point, is the Canary mission was lying or didn't know they were wrong, didn't care. So this clip's been going around. And we have seen so many of these, of this woman like proudly saying Sieg Heil with a hijab on. Here's the clip.
Fucking Hitler. How fucking Hitler. And any
I forgot that she's cursing, by the way. So if there's children, she says the F word. Give you a second to earmuff them.
How fucking Hitler. And any fucking Hitler friend or fucking anti-Zionist, fucking fuck you guys too. How fucking Hitler. How fucking Hitler. And guess what?
I will pray for you.
What do you do for the Palestinian babies?
I will.
Say, you can listen to the rest if you want. The bottom line is, if you're out there saying that you're anti-Zionist and then doing that, you're a moron, or you don't understand either of them. And I don't even know that exists. I've never met a person in my life that, like, it's like saying that Hamas are Nazis. It's absurdly stupid. It just ideologically even make sense. And so the bottom line is that should be questionable from the beginning, but certainly could exist because anything's possible. But the point is, Alex Jones highlights that, which a lot of them did. And he says, I don't like Adolf Hitler, and I also hate the anti-free speech police state the West is turning into. Well, you're very brave to state those things. Hitler is dead, but the globalist system has not yet been totally dismantled. It's the main threat to humanity. A woman was detained by police in California for shouting Heil Hitler and performing a salute. America is not a free country if this continues. I mean, do you already know where this is going about how that's so stupid for him? I mean, it's hollow. And I said, it's happening because of the very people you support, which I know he does. And they are also the ones quite literally rolling out the globalist agenda, as you also know, even as you pretend it's being dismantled, right? So come on, really? Like the idea that we're going to talk about what dismantled globalism we're talking about. I've never seen a more unified building direction for that whole conversation. It's sad how this keeps happening. But the idea that you don't like the police state, who do you think that's coming from, bud? Who do you think is Donald Trump's administration both times have pushed forward the anti-Semitism bill, which is why that's happening. So you're going to just skip over that major part of the conversation that you don't like what it's turning into? Of course, he'll give lip service to calling out parts of Trump when that happens, but never actually mobilize anything against it or always support them when it matters because these people aren't honest. The point, though, is getting this out there, right? Well, it turns out, oh, by the way, also another example, weird how it happened in multiple locations where this supposed Muslim one just couldn't stop going up to people with phones and going, dude, Sieg Heil, and yelling right in front of them. Right. And it just so happened to be Canary Mission and anti-Semitism. It makes sense. Or people that got the videos. Seems weird to me. Here she is doing the same thing. Look. I mean, come on. This is stop anti-Semitism. Shield driver were detained and questioned by police, which, yes, is insane that you're being questioned and detained for saying anything. And that's the point. Here she is. And this is Dr. Anastasia pointing out thoughts on this woman. This person says she's a Mossad agent and definitely not a Muslim. Here she is. We'll just cut right to her account. Here she is on her account. Not to say that just because she's being scantily dressed that it proves that she's not a Muslim, but you're wearing a hijab over here, okay? If you're wearing a hijab and then you're on your video showing off your naked body, that's a contradictory thing, okay? But maybe, who knows? Maybe she just doesn't care. But when it comes down to it, the point that I find most interesting is that she has a tattoo that appears to be Hebrew. And so I don't understand how that would make sense. This is not complete. It's up in the air. I'm going to show you that I think these things are verifiably happening and have been for a long time because of intelligence operations or whatever you want to call it. This to me is let's just put it like this. Even if she's a Muslim, I find it to be very, very suspect. Because all of it doesn't line up, and the two things don't make sense to me when you look at this, and everyone else is calling out similar things. You can look into it. You can look at her YouTube account, her Instagram, and you'll find a lot of Israel comments and stuff. I think that's very telling. And let's not forget that Donald Trump's administration rolled out the anti-Semitism bill that Alex Jones is pointing at as if it's a problem, which doesn't seem to have an issue when they roll it out, and it's promises kept every day. Anyone who's troubled by the new bill, Michael writes, that radically expands the definition of federally criminalizable anti-Semitism really ought to direct their frustrations at Trump. because the bill passed yesterday largely codifies the executive order that he issued in 2019. No surprise there if you're following this platform. That's what that is saying Americans will be criminalized for speaking truth about what Israel's doing. Or by that fact, just saying things about Israel, even if they're not true, it's still protected under free speech. That's important. So how is over here outraged about that woman and how that's why. I just think that's insane. Very clear what's going on. They refuse to acknowledge that. Now, here's an overlap that brings back to the immigration point, which they all seem to support, Jones included, calling out without acknowledging that it's a foundational issue for constitutional rights. Sam can see it. Sam Tripoli says, so gross. These anti-Semitism laws are simply Trojan horses to martial law and shredding of the Constitution. See, Sam sees it. And here is, another politician, which is on the left, which again, reason I'm even saying I was going to go into it, but I'm not. The point is, don't dismiss things because of the person on the other side of the argument. Guys, look at the facts. They desperately need that from you. They need you to choose a side and push back on anything that's not from your side. That is the easiest way they can manipulate. The point is, regardless of what she's saying, what's happening is Rubio is telling you that Ozturk got her visa revoked for an op-ed. That's it. We know that already. But the point is that that's where this is going, that they're choosing to do so. And what's the point about the op-ed? Because it calls out Israel. So right there is an example, in principle, no different than removing your right to be here as American. It's the same constitutional right.
A guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So they starts with the guest point. You gave her a visa. So once that's done, you can't then just yank it for no reason. That's what they really want ignorant people to think. It's not true. You have to prove these things. Yeah, there are valid reasons why it would get yanked, but you have to prove those like anything else. Here's what we claim she did. Here's the evidence to back it up. They don't have any of that. You can't yank her visa because she wrote an article about Israel. That's what he's arguing is the case. So just as a constitutional American out there that understands rights, you should be outraged by that.
States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do that at all, not even remotely. And they've tried desperately to manufacture a case that doesn't exist. That's why she was already released.
Do any of that? She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
Are you serious? Like, you see, this is how crazy this is. Rubio is doing that to make a point that gets shred on Twitter that people claim is the truth because they're dumb enough to not look at the facts. If you look at what Rubio and the rest of them actually argued in court, nobody has anything. That's what happened in court. That's why she was released. They're still trying to deport her, but they don't have any evidence other than an op-ed. That is literally it. And he just lied publicly because he's hoping people are dumb enough to go, he said it, therefore that is the case, which some of them don't even care. That'll become the talking point because they just hate her, or they want to fight the Democrats or fight whatever they think they're doing. And you're helping them destroy the Constitution.
Reclaiming my time, you revoked her student visa because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would you revoke?
We're going to do more.
And he's doubling down. We'll do more. We'll do more. This just shows you the kind of juvenile nature of Rubio. Like I think it's about him trying to bluster. I think he's a very small person in a lot of ways.
Revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest.
Are you going to revoke the visa?
Here to stir up trouble? Is that a law now? Or walk me through the law, Rubio, of stirring up trouble. See, this is what's so embarrassing. You damn well know out there, if you know even the smallest amount, clearly more than Rubio apparently, or I just think he's lying to be honest, you know that doesn't make sense. There's no legal reality there. Be honest about this, guys. You have to be clear about what a big deal this is.
Visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
The case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy.
Oh, and by the way, let's not forget there were two other writers. What about them, Rubio? What'd they do? The same thing. Exactly the two other authors of the op-ed. Let's be clear, regardless of whether you don't know any better, if you read what was presented in court, the evidence that they had, that's it. The national security threat she poses by ideas she put forward in that op-ed. What about the other two? Weird how they weren't called out. You know why? Because she's been a vocal opposition. She's been protesting. That's why. They know what they're doing, and this is straight from the hands of Israel. This is Israel first all day long at the expense of Americans.
Anyone who's in this country as a guest
Are
who's
you
here to stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case,
that,
I'll look at it.
that
I'm
statement?
looking
well,
to get crazy people
actually,
out of our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the
Secretary
visas of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Exactly.
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
I knew it. It's so funny. I didn't even hear. That is so ridiculous to me. So the idea clearly. So basically, by that logic, then literally everybody should always hide their identity, never present a warrant. The idea that they're trying to turn it into the radical lefties are going to attack them. Well, it's the same exact argument for radical righties doing the same thing in reverse. The point is, it doesn't matter. The law is what matters. They are legally required to present a warrant. And if you ask and have a badge ready, identify themselves. That's the law. They're required to do that, but they don't care. Just one after another showing you how little they care about the things that we hold sacred in this country. And let's not forget, by the way, I've been warning people. There's a lot of these clips here, and there's plenty more I could add to this. It goes on and on and on about Trump telling you that he will work for Israel at the expense of American interests. And I'll just play this one again, the one I briefly played a second ago, of him telling you point blank, remove the Jew haters from the country. And then all of a sudden this starts happening and we're pretending like they're not the same conversation. That's what he's doing. Now, let's be clear. The people they're going after, or the people they're calling that, most of them are just supporting Palestine. But even if they're out there saying, I hate Jewish people, that is your right under free speech, under ideological freedom, 100%. If you can stand up and say, I hate white people, you can stand up and say, I hate anything. I can say you're disgusting for either. And I would say that. The point is, you damn well know it's protected under your rights. But here's what he said, and we tried to warn everybody.
We will remove the jihadist sympathizers and Jew haters.
And by the way, jihadist sympathizer can mean whatever the hell they want it to mean. And it's still, unless you're providing material support for X, Y, and Z, still your ideological right to say and think what you want. But every day, every second, they're inching the national security interest forward to the expense of your rights. I mean, it's self-evident. Every day, the Patriot Act going forward. I mean, every moment, every event, every time, they're grabbing more. We used to all be able to see this, it seems.
We're going to remove the Jew haters who do nothing to help our country. They only want to destroy our country. And we will never let the horrors of October 7th be repeated here on American soil. We will remove.
I was going to pause it and be done with it. Where is that? What do you mean repeated? That is an Israeli claim, which, and quite frankly, most people come to understand it as a threat, right? Especially since you understand that they fund Hamas, which is easy to prove right up until October 7th, that they very clearly did this to keep them divided. They lied about the previous deals. They've been lying about literally everything ever since the pager point, which will be relevant in a second. I'll play that clip for you, I think, next, coming up or two clips. What do they tell you about the pagers? The world is our stage. And we can't then think about whether what just happened or what might happen tomorrow is somehow part of that play. Certainly worth your time. Watch these for yourself. Be blown away with how ridiculous all these is. Or this one where he literally says that Israel used to own Congress and should, rightly so, clearly still does. And here's Jones. The assassination last night of the Israeli diplomat and his wife in D.C. paves the way for more coming attacks that will serve as the pretext for the Israeli assault on Iran's nuclear facilities. That has a high probability of triggering nuclear war. The globalists are turning up the heat. It's funny to me. So even in that statement, you're almost weirdly acknowledging that Israel are the globalists, or at least a huge part of this. But in every other effort, you find a way to push that away or wiggle out of it and never acknowledge what's actually happening. Find that interesting. But the idea of these assassinations and they're obviously the overlap in foreign policy can't be ignored. But what we're talking about here is something immediately happening here. And he's over here talking about the woman in the street and censorship. But then this happens and they all immediately start calling for censorship. And that's the come on. I think we need to start recognizing how easily these people are just immediately trying to derail you. Look over there. Talk about this. Conflating conversations. Never really seeing the full picture, especially since it always comes down to Democrat deep state pedophiles, instead of the reality that that's pretty much your whole government. What we know about the D.C. shooting where 2 staff members of the Israeli embassy were killed. It says 2 staff members of the Israeli embassy in Washington were fatally shot. This is yesterday, yesterday evening while leaving an event at a Jewish museum. The suspect yelled, "Free, free Palestine," after he was arrested. The attack was seen by officials in Israel and the U.S. as the latest in a growing wave of anti-Semitism, as Israel ramps up its offense in the Gaza Strip, as the food security experts have warned Gaza risks falling into famine. Yeah, I love how they've been in famine stage, according to the IPC, for half a year. But they're always one step away from, it's always how they keep this, like, they've been there. It's done. They're starving to death. The point, though, what was it? So he says free Palestine. Anyone who explain for me what that has to do with Jewish people? Yeah, the Israeli embassy, sure. There are atheists that live there too, right? There are people that are not Jewish. But the point is, they're telling you it's anti-Semitic. And then when you ask why, when you're talking about free Palestine and somebody who shot Israelis, and because it's Israel, that's the Jews. But then you say that and you're racist. I mean, this is why the whole thing is crumbling in front of people, because you can't be racist when you point and say what they just told you was happening. But that's the game. You're racist no matter what. And that's the whole thing we keep seeing, is that people are calling everybody anti-Semitic. Like Smotrich has called somebody anti-Semitic for simply saying that their plan was going to hurt Gazans. It's just constantly lazy. I think they know that nobody's buying it, and this narrative is about maintaining government control. But here's what it says. The suspect was observed pacing outside the museum before the shooting, walked into the museum after the shooting, and was detained. Fantastic. So it says when he was taken into custody, he began shouting, "Free, free Palestine." The law enforcement did not believe there was an ongoing threat to the community. It was not immediately clear whether Rodriguez had an attorney who could comment on his behalf. A telephone number listed on public records rang unanswered. As lawyers typically do, just leave their own phones on ringing all day long, right? Or it seems like something was constructed here. You can decide for yourself. But I find it insanely stupid that you're talking about somebody who shot people and then walked inside the museum to be arrested. And then when the photo opportunity was ready, you have Palestine. Maybe he just wanted, but then if we're talking about killing Jews, where is the evidence of racially motivated actions? Seems like a government action about Israel killing people in Palestine. But see, they need to conflate these things. Now, whatever the reality is, I think it's important to go through this and understand the bigger picture around it and understand how this is already being used. Sal Yagara says all violence is wrong, obviously. I agree with him. But the reason mainstream media focuses on the death of 2 Israelis and not on the 82 to 98 Palestinians whom Israel's murdered the past 24 hours, which is basically every day right now, is to round out support for their war machine. All of it matters. No, one is not. The people being killed matters. The point, though, is that if you're going to make such a huge focus on these 2, what about the other 98 that were killed over the last 24, or any other number of examples? It's not just in Gaza. You could make many examples of people, but this is what they all focus on. You can't miss why that is. Nader also points out this overlap. He says, weird, I don't remember mainstream media, pro-Israel social media accounts, or politicians saying a word about this when it happened. 2 months ago, Jewish man mistakes 2 Israeli tourists for Palestinians, opens fire on them in Miami. We talked about that. So you're in Florida, a Jewish man thinks these Israeli tourists are Palestinians and fires at them. Think about how wild that is. That barely got any attention. Isn't it like the exact same thing in reverse? Well, yeah, that's a perfect example to show you why some people are more equal than others in the minds of in the corporate media and the government. Michael Tracy says, blowback used to be a well-understood concept. If the U.S. is going to politically and militarily enable an endless annihilation campaign in Gaza, it's overwhelmingly foreseeable that blowback should occur in form of violent, irrational attacks by radicalized rogue actors. The point simply is that it's obviously expected, not to say it's okay. There are crimes and people should be held accountable for crimes, regardless of your side or how justifiable you may think it is. The bottom line is that we know this is going to happen. The people, whether in this country or elsewhere, are going to be like not just motivated, like radicalized to the idea that they're going to attack the people the people that allowed their family to be raped and tortured and mutilated in front of them. I mean, ask what conservatives would do if somebody invaded Florida or wherever state they're in and then did that to their family. Are you going to go to the ICJ? You're going to walk to the police station and say, hey, I mean, come on, guys. You know damn well what most of these people ignoring what's going on over there would be doing without a second thought. It would be revolution. The Cradle says, Israeli embassy employee, one of the ones that were killed in Washington, had served in Israeli military, openly supported the Gaza genocide. One of the Israeli embassy employees killed in Washington on Wednesday, Yaron Lichinsky, had served in the Israeli military and dismissed UN warnings about mass child deaths from starvation in Gaza as blood libel, even though it's completely provable. Days before his death, he endorsed Israel's Gideon Chariots operation, an official strategy to occupy and seize full control of Gaza through a ground invasion, forcibly displace its population to a southern enclave or outside the country, and restrict humanitarian aid to the minimum. This is one of them here. We'll show you why I think this is important in a second, seeing as how he doesn't appear to be Jewish. He retweets this. Here, as the squirrel breaks down, Lichinsky was not even Jewish. He was a crazed Christian Zionist who volunteered to serve in the Israel army and did propaganda for them at the embassy. This makes calling this an anti-Semitic attack interesting, doubly deranged, and actually the height of anti-Semitism. Typical. By conflating Israel and non-Jewish Israelis with all Jews. Not when they do it, though, of course. And, of course, the entire media and political class is doing it with utter glee so they can launder genocidal Zionist propaganda. Well, this is very easy to prove, by the way. A Christian Zionist is who this person was, who served in the IDF and, as they say, dedicated his life to Israel and Zionism. So doesn't that matter? All these people are calling it a racially anti-Semitic attack, and the guy's not Jewish. One of them, anyway. So that makes it a multiracial attack? I mean, you can't keep pretending it's what they say when the facts aren't there. And here's what you keep getting. These are the so-called journalists like Christopher Cuomo who probably don't even look. They probably don't even know this guy's a Christian Zionist. He says, well, this is AOC saying absolutely nothing justifies the murder of innocents. Well, I agree with that. I am devastated by the killing of 2 people outside of the event here in Washington. Our prayers are with the victims, families, and the loved ones of all impacted. As we await more details, we must be clear that hatred has no home here. Anti-Semitism is a threat to all. They're all in line with that. Anti-Semitism is no more a threat than any other word, racial idea. It is a thought, and you can call it out if you want to. The point is that when you begin the idea that you're supposed to be going after and suppressing, holding accountable one certain kind of hatred, it becomes weaponized. Once crimes are committed, there are laws for these things. That's how this works. Every one of them are driving in the same direction. They're all behind the idea of censoring you for certain ideas. Her point goes on to say, anti-Semitism is a threat to all we hold dear in a society. It must be confronted. So she's literally all in line with all of them. And that's not enough, though. See, Christopher Cuomo saw an opportunity to be the one that gets more attention. You're not pro-Zionist enough, he says. He comes out and goes, not just innocents, Jews. Why ignore that? You know all you need to do, and you know all you need to. The shooter confessed and said why he did it. No, he said free Palestine. And many who support him call him a hero. Wow. As she says, probably because the guy was literally a Christian, you propagandist hack. These people are shameless, guys. But it doesn't matter. He'll be supported for it because he used the idea that it was focused on Jews. It's an anti-Semitism attack. Okay. Well, Suppressed News points out an interesting overlap. It's interesting how on the same day that Israel, which you might have seen, shot at European and Arab diplomats, who they did. 2 Israeli embassy staff were shot and killed in Washington the same day. What a coincidence. And now the focus shifts to how Jews feel unsafe in the world. Meanwhile, as far as you could tell, by the way, other than conflating Palestine with anything, and they've gotten caught for this every time they try to push the narrative. Ask Jewish people all over the world, they seem more safe than ever, or as safe as anybody else in any other circumstance. There's racially motivated violence anywhere. Now today, though, you could see an uptick because of what Zionism is doing, because of what Israel is doing, and it's unjustified. People that are attacking them because of Zionism, who tells them it's because of Jewish people, and it's not. It's insanely how obvious this is. The point, though, is you can keep showing that the ADL gets caught over and over conflating Palestinian flags with threats to Jewish people, or lying about people getting stabbed with flags, or lying about people getting locked in libraries, lying every moment, and yet the next claim taken at face value. That's not by accident. Meanwhile, Israel had shot diplomats, killed over 19,000 children, over 210 journalists, and bombed schools and hospitals. But somehow, it's still all about Zionists, how Zionists feel. Thank you to Lemming for pointing this out. Here's the clip, by the way. You can see this, and there's a lot more evidence around this. They claim they shot over them or something. They basically shot right at these people. Of course, and then it spins out and they say that there was an accident and it was a mistake and they feel they do it every single day, guys. And on top of that, they do this right after other discussions that made them very embarrassed. It's constant what these people are doing. You can't just keep pretending like these are not. They've shot diplomats, they've shot UN members, they've shot UNRWA members, they've shot Central Kitchen members, they've shot Doctors Without Borders. I mean, how are we still pretending like this doesn't make sense? It's infuriating to pretend like this is not the most obvious thing in the world. And James Lee points out, search is the new censorship. Okay, so you've got them shooting at diplomats, which, by the way, was everywhere and was pretty embarrassing for them. Then, the very next day, so he types in, Israel shooting diplomats. That's what it shows you. Foreign diplomats come under fire in the West Bank. Okay. The very next day, Israel shooting diplomats. 2 Israeli embassy staffers shot. 2 Israeli, that's all you get. Almost as if you made sure it was an embassy overlap so that diplomat point got buried. I mean, I know that sounds very conspiratorial. We need to be aware of how gross these people are, what they're willing to do. And he says, simply pointing out the search. You can't deny that. Noctis Draven says, they are going to blow this way up. I promise. Be prepared to see this, and this is opinion, be all over the news. That is what's happening. Media, celebrities, the accounts here you expect, of course, will pound this home nonstop, which we're already seeing. Mark my words, he says, this entire week will be filled with every talking head, every pundit, every account, commentator to pull us into war with Iran. Now, it could be that. And we haven't touched on that yet. Because to me, at this point, we've heard them float this many times. If you haven't seen Israel, the supposed leak is that Israel is planning to hit Iran, which might, for crying out loud, yes, most likely. It's not new. But I think, since we touch on it, that's them floating this idea that's always on the table to say that if you don't make the deal with Trump, then that's what's going to happen. Like, that's what I think that fake leak was about. Basically, using one more coercive tool to say, make this deal or you're going to get bombed, which Iran already knows they're willing to do. So I don't know how that plays out. I think this is coming regardless of whether they make this thing happen in this country. But I think, for me, far more about censorship, suppression, and control of our lives in this country. And the Iran point will overlap. There's always multifaceted. But you can't miss how this plays into the long-term agenda in regard to the speech and also arresting Americans, deporting Americans based on accusations of Israel. It says, mark my words, the entire week we filled with this. Pushing into war with Iran and he adds that point too, to tackle hate speech on Twitter and other platforms, which is what they say. They will say Twitter and other social media is harboring hate speech. Nothing new. Now it's anti-Semitism instead of something else. To cost Americans and Jewish people their lives. No, they'll just skip Americans and say Jewish people, which is what they're doing. Mark my words, they are all dressed and ready for their presser, ready to spin the BS. By this time tomorrow night, boomers across America will be begging for war with Iran, begging to have more free speech taken away. 100% false flag, he says. Also, get ready to send kids to grandkids send your kids to die for Israel. Now, I don't know. My gut tells me this is completely manufactured. Not necessarily people didn't die, or that maybe they killed their own. Hannibal directive is something we know happened, so it wouldn't surprise me they're willing to go that far, especially with what's on the line, guys. They are in the middle of a genocide. The whole world can see. You should not think anything's outside of the realm of possibility here. Here's what she said.
Mayor, thank you. Chief, thank you. Ambassador, our hearts go out to you and your staff. I spoke to the President of the United States multiple times tonight on behalf of the President. His prayers are with all of us, all of the Jewish community, everyone in Washington, D.C., state, local, and federal agencies, and our great U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro, who will be prosecuting this case. We'll be doing everything in our power to keep all citizens safe.
So just like Tesla, this becomes mission number one. Everything else you want, conservatives and Republicans, Americans, that's all back. That's backseat now. This is number one. Mark my words. I guarantee you. One of her first things she came out to do was to start an investigation on October 7th. How does that even relate to Americans other than the few American overlaps? That's wild to me. Clearly, this is an Israel first administration. That's not even contentious anymore. I mean, literally, people like Napolitano, Jeffrey Sachs, people that are on mainstream, they're going, this is complete. Or Colonel McGregor just said that. He's owned by the Israel lobby. You remember when that used to be some very crazy thing to say? Guys, the evidence is everywhere.
Especially tonight, our Jewish community. Our prayers go out. We have the FBI. All of our federal agencies will work hand in hand with you, Chief, as we have done, and you, Mayor, to do everything we can to keep our citizens safe. We will follow the facts. We will follow the law. And this defendant, if charged, will be prosecuted to the fullest extent.
It's funny. I get the sense that somebody clearly told her to say if charged, because they never seem to do that. Because, because basically the point is we'll do what charge we want. And I think they're recognizing how their language can be taken. I think they know that they're losing, in my opinion. Whatever. I don't mean left versus right, clearly. Okay, but so the bigger point here is what we already know. Like this, we talked about this in regard to how Israel infiltrates countries around the world. Israel's infiltration of the U.S. tech field in light of the pager attack in Lebanon. A decade, apparently, if you listen to them, 5 years from the reports, they let these pagers circulate the country. The argument being they're packed full of explosives. I still question whether there might be more of this. It might be kind of a manufactured narrative to scare people. It could have been done, something they did that week, and they claimed it was there for 10 years to scare us. But I mean, the evidence backs that up. The point being, they're willing to, 75% of the people hurt were women and children. You can still look up the list of kids with missing eyes and limbs because of this. And so think about that and what that means for what other kind of operations they're conducting for the same kind of thing. You think they're not willing to kill innocent people for their agenda? Look right in front of you. Now, here is what they said in the interview. The world is our stage.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
And I also love this. Clearly, that looks like the spitting image of freedom and democracy, doesn't it? The very way our enforcement Gestapo are starting to look. You know, that to me looks like the way we expect terrorists to look. Just pointing that out.
Hezbollah to buy this.
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
Unit 8200 Israeli tech companies. And that's how it works. There's peppered around this country right now.
Have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
Think about that. I mean, truly. Guys, I mean, that's wild. They're so brazen and they're so full of hubris, unjustified, in my opinion, just putting it out there. They can't help but say, we're running your lives, we're controlling what you do. Like, that's when Netanyahu gets caught saying we can pit the left versus right, we can control the U.S. government. He's been on video saying that more than once, and yet we still can't see it. I mean, they're literally telling you that the world is their stage. They're running the production, the global. He made that clear more than once. Now, maybe that's hubris and maybe he's overshooting his reach. Kind of hard to miss what's going on, though, isn't it? And yet we have trouble connecting the dots sometimes when it comes to that because people are so afraid of being called racist. That's how it works. Now, let's talk about the prevalence. Mossad, proxy, faked, violent Facebook, anti-Semitism. This is one article from Electronic Intifada, but there's plenty of them. The whole death to all Jews turned out to be a Jewish person. Rather specifically, Mossad elements through the Jewish, basically Jewish Mossad agents who are manipulating this to make it look like they were being attacked when it turned out they were doing it themselves, which is never to say that there's not racist, that there's not anti-Semitism, there's not racism, it exists, but that it is taken advantage of and then manufactured, which then shows you that they don't have the amount that would be justifiable, so they have to, it's so constant. Now, I'm not going to play this whole thing. I've played it before, but I want to play some of this because it's a quick compilation of showing you how many times they've lied. Shin Bet arrests 3 suspects in bus bombing, including Israeli Jews. That was a recent one we just talked about. I think that's, oh, here it is. I was going to say, I think I went wrong with that. Here it is.
In Palestine stage, and in this episode, we reveal how Israel is ramping up efforts to stage fake anti-Semitic attacks across the world to undermine solidarity for the growing pro-Palestine movement. But first, please remember to like and subscribe to our show. Now let's get into it. The Zionist lobby, in a single word, is desperate. It's growing desperate because it's finding it increasingly difficult to confront a growing shift in American public opinion towards the Palestinian people during the past year and a half. A new reality that's costing the Israel lobby hundreds of millions of dollars, having spent a whopping $25 million on just 2 of 534 congressional races during the most recent US election. Money, however, is only one side of the equation, the other being manipulation. And it's here where Israel gets really down and dirty in the trenches. It's here where bogus allegations of anti-Semitism are used as a smokescreen to shield the self-proclaimed Jewish state from condemnation as it commits genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing in the occupied West Bank. Yeah, you already know this. But what's new here is the way in which Israel and its allies.
He's pointing to a BBC article that says anti-Semitic crimes may be funded overseas, says Australian police. We've talked about that one as well. The evidence begins to show that people are funding these things from places like Israel.
Are staging, manufacturing, and sponsoring fake anti-Semitic attacks in Western countries to garner sympathy for the dying Zionist state.
Been a huge twist in the investigation of anti-Semitic attacks across Australia. The Australian Federal Police now investigating the possibility that some of the perpetrators may have been paid by foreign actors to commit hate crimes.
In Camperdown, a 33-year-old man is arrested over an alleged attempt to burn down a synagogue in Sydney's inner west.
A second man is still yet to be arrested, but we expect to make an arrest shortly.
But some of those responsible might not even be in the country. The Federal Police dropping this bombshell.
We believe criminals for hire may be behind some incidents.
And that those criminals for hire may be recruited and paid by someone overseas.
It would appear that some of these are being perpetrated by people who don't have a particular issue, aren't motivated by an ideology, but are paid actors.
They're so desperate, so carefully trying not to say the obvious, and the evidence is there.
While Channel 10 chose not to identify Israel by name in its report, it really didn't need to, because it's patently obvious that Israel, and only Israel, has everything to gain from manufactured anti-Semitic attacks. And as someone who has long covered the Israel lobby's intimidation tactics against Australian media outlets, I'm acutely aware of the pressure and threats journalists and editors have to endure when reporting the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. An unfortunate reality laid bare by more than 200 journalists and editors at the national broadcaster ABC Australia. The very same news media organisations.
Just in the interest, this is a 14-minute clip. It's not that long, but I want to finish this out so we don't lose the consistency of what we're talking about. But walks through it. It's well done. And the source material below. Zionist groups are falsifying anti-Semitism statistics, and the media are playing along. Daily Telegraph tries and fails to stage anti-Semitic incident. We just talked about that one recently, actually. Shin Bet arrests 3 suspects in bus bombing, including Jews who were involved with that. They were, and it was claimed to be anti-Semitic. It was claimed to be Palestinians. Zionists are staging anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. U.S. Israeli man jailed for 10 years over bomb hoax calls. I mean, it goes on and on and on, guys. It's very, very, very obvious. So I'll include the interview we did with James Lee about his ADL documentary. I think it's worth your time. I'll also include the show we did before. There it goes. Everything's freezing up on me. Zionism versus Nazism, Israel's connection to extremist ideology, and the ADL's history of faking Nazi marches. It goes over everything we talked about, as well as the history of all these, and it goes pretty deep on some of these. Now, Dan Cohen puts this out. This was today. The deranged Washington, D.C. Israeli embassy staff shooter gave a gift to the Zionist lobby, shifting the international spotlight away from Israel's ongoing genocide and starvation of Gaza, and providing a pretext for crackdowns on constitutionally protected rights. The fact that Ellis Rodriguez didn't attempt to flee the scene and made sure to have someone film him shouting "Free Palestine" is extremely bizarre. Many are speculating that shootings are a false flag, which could be true, though no conclusive evidence has been presented. I agree. The association between murder and Free Palestine will now be used to paint anyone who opposes genocide as a domestic terrorist. Simple as that, even though that's absurd. Just because one person says that and kills somebody, even if they mean it, does not then make everybody saying it guilty. But that's the way they roll, guys. That is the way your government works. The American Constitution is under attack. The fake patriot government officials and media mouthpieces are salivating at the thought of criminalizing dissent. Exactly. Elijah Monnier says, watch carefully to see how many world leaders will rush to condemn the attack on the 2 Israeli embassy employees in Washington, D.C. Then compare this to how they respond to Israeli crimes in Gaza that are happening as we speak. Notice the hypocrisy, double standards. Some lives matter while others don't. And let's not forget that Donald Trump recently signed into law the anti-Semitic, what was the term again? I forget the name of the bill. Another piece of legislation. In fact, as we pointed out, enshrining his 2019 executive order that criminalizing your speech, guys. There's no way around this. You can see all the people around him all the, Dershowitz. I mean, it's very clear. This is being driven against American interests. Now here, and this is today, as Glenn points out, the ADL is already exploiting the murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers. The ADL that right now works with Twitter, by the way, to demand more limits on free speech, specifically demanding Israel critics, and with large platforms such as this one is, I don't think I'm familiar with this one, be banned for speaking. Can't even wait 24 hours until demanding censorship, right? That's how this works. Now, this is going to continue. Now, when it becomes the law, according to their unconstitutional acts, which according to Mayberry versus Madison would be repugnant to the Constitution, therefore null and void, doesn't mean they're not going to enforce it at the end of a gun, though, right? Point is that when that becomes the case, and Elon starts saying, well, that's the law, so we have to censor you like he's doing in India and Turkey and everywhere else, is that still absolutely free speech? Obviously, even right now, that's not the case. But everyone will argue otherwise because they have an agenda. Here is Greenblatt already arguing.
All of us need to call it out. I'm thinking about the New York Times doing a gauzy profile a few weeks ago of this gamer, Hassan Piker, who regularly employs awful genocidal rhetoric against Jewish people in the
words. Right. Now, if you actually listen, I mean, in regard, you know what? Actually, I'm thinking of the wrong guy. What's the name you just said?
He employs awful gems, doing a gauzy profile a few weeks. Just need to call it out. I'm thinking about the New York Times doing a gauzy profile a few weeks ago of this gamer, Hassan Piker, who...
Okay, I think that's the guy he's heard. I thought he said somebody else the first time I heard that. The point, regardless, is I'm not familiar with the guy they were referencing, so I don't know. Maybe he's out there screaming actually racist things. Either way, guys, that's the best way to make the point. It's still free speech. Why is an Israeli ADL agent, rather, pretending to be pro-American, out here screaming that we need to suppress your speech? And how is any American okay with that, regardless of what direction it takes? On top of that, we know as a matter of fact that people can say free Palestine, and they want that to stop under the same argument. I don't know why this makes sense to anybody who even remotely understands their rights.
Legally employs awful genocidal rhetoric against Jewish people in the Jewish state.
Which is free speech.
Extremists should not be empowered. People who spout prejudice should not be platformed. This is a moment when we need...
So by that language, then, that means not Elon Musk, that means not Trump, that means not Biden, that means nobody, because all of them are screaming in one sense or another very clearly racist things. But see, they don't care about all the racism. They like racism. They just don't want you to talk about Israel's crimes, which they pretend are racism.
To look ourselves in the mirror and say, we've got to stop this because the consequences are deadly.
Right. So you can't say what you want because they think that leads to bad things. Even if it does, it's your right. Now, here's the White House coming right out of the gate yesterday. Trump saying these horrible DC killings based obviously on anti-Semitism. How in the world? That is the game. That is the agenda. You don't know what he said free Palestine. For you to push that means you're part of the agenda. And at the very least, pushing your personal opinion is absolute fact, which is Trump 101. Hatred and radicalism have no place in the United States. Well, technically, hatred, radicalism, unless you're breaking the law, or you're right. You can say, because they'll say radicalism is saying free Palestine. You can hate whatever you want. At what point do they start telling you you're not allowed to hate things? Isn't that just like the left? Yes, it is. But see, now it's the good kind. We're fighting them with the right push, whatever. How do you want to frame how stupid this is? We're doing it back to them so we can center it back to, you'll bring all the rights back. Shut up. It's absurd. So sad that such things can happen. Yeah, people being shot is always sad, but guess what? There's already crimes for that. You can already put them in jail. They'll be in jail. Or he'll be in jail for the rest of his life. Isn't that enough? Why do you have to then cascade this into censoring other Americans for things that are completely unrelated? Because you guys are all part of the same game. Now, the White House shared it, put the same thing out. So they are pushing this hard. No surprise there. If you thought this would be different, you're not paying attention. Well, here's Waleed Shahid pointing out what this Randy Fine said. The guy who screamed, bomb the kids. Like one of the most extremist American politicians I've ever seen. Just proudly saying children should starve to death, keep them starving, bombs away. People will show videos of dead children. He goes, yes, give me more. That's not a joke. He's done it more than once, and Trump has endorsed him many times because he is brazenly pro-Zionist, anti-American. He won't say that, but what he does is directly contradicting American interests. Here, he now says because they killed them, we should nuke Gaza. Pretty moderate, right?
The matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one.
Yeah, and Congressman.
Wow. Right. A Palestinian cause is evil. Think about that, guys. Really try to absorb what he just said right there, that we're talking about a cause for people who are being genocided, people who are standing up for people, even if you think they're wrong, who are driven by the need for them to be kept, to have self-determination, to have a life of their own. And evil, he says. Why? Because he's a Zionist. He does not agree with any of those things, and that is anti-American at its core. These people are dangerous, guys.
There is a ceasefire deal on the table right now that the White House is hoping both Israel and Hamas will sign on to. Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
How much you want to bet he's going to say that we should end it because they did that?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese.
This guy is literally like 101 talking points directly from the Israeli government. Look it up. Look at it. This might as well be an interview with the Israeli ambassador. Like that, it's exactly what they say. 101 right out of the gate.
Twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender.
He's lying, by the way, or he's as dumb as he looks, which is the fact that they were already in retreat when that happened. That's easy to look up, in fact. That's become common knowledge outside of government lies. They did it in order to demonstrate that to the world, to probably just test it out. They were in retreat. But this doesn't matter to anybody who cares about facts.
That needs.
Or I said that backwards, but it cares to only people that care about facts. The government clearly does not.
To be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
So however you want to feel about that, what he's telling you is that you're not allowed to think these things. If you want to say certain things in this country, you're no longer allowed because whatever they think. Is that American? Is that somebody fighting for American interests or somebody fighting to censor Americans against their interests? Sure, you can piece that together. These people are dangerous, and Trump has endorsed him every single time. Dan Bongino, last night's act of terror. Now it's terror. Look, crime, sure. Violence, terrorism. Now everything they want to make into something they can abuse is terrorism. Why? Because that opens the door to all sorts of national security and unilateral actions like Alien Enemies Act stuff, wherever direction they want to take it in. Terrorism. It's like anti-Semitism. Now it's meaningless because they'll say whatever they want is terrorism because it's shocking, it sounds bigger, they can use more things, they get more resources. These people are dangerous. And I mean your government, guys. It's not left and right. Last night's act of terror has the full attention of your FBI, not the Epstein discussion, right? Not the mRNA, great poisoning, Catherine calls it, not any other conversation. JFK, people that stole money during the last administration, not Gates, not Fauci, not any of them, not Biden. No. But we're going to go after Tesla people. We're going to lie to you about Jeffrey Epstein. Full attention given to these people. What about everybody else? These people are so selectively focused on anything Israel related. It's disgusting. Targeted acts of anti-Semitic violence are typically carried out by spineless, gutless cowards. It's just so funny to me. It's so clear they're trying to appease something. What do you think that is? Somebody's watching. A violent attack against anybody is you could argue this. Why an anti-Semitic attack? They're so clearly trying to make this case. Now, look again, in case you missed the first point. Nope, People should be held accountable for crime like this, no matter what. And just because these people are Israeli embassies doesn't mean they're bad people. Doesn't mean they're immediately people. You don't know is the point. They could be people here who have the same values as you. So it shouldn't be immediately assumed that something is, they're good riddance or whatever. Because I see the same kind of thing happening, and I call that out too. Point is, this is him trying to use them. That's what this is. And he says, and the penalties will be harsh as we tighten up this investigation and run down any additional leads. I should have additional updates for you shortly. Well, I would imagine that the penalties would be what they should be, right? Based on murder, or is it going to be something more, which is what I would expect. And yeah, or let's pretend like he's going to run down anything. I'm pretty sure this guy's not even in the loop, if you want my honest opinion. Here's the EPA, because it makes total sense for the EPA to speak up about anti-Semitic attacks, right? And he says, I just met with Sarah, and this is the EPA account, even though it says Lee Zeldin. It says, I just met Sarah 2 weeks ago in my office at EPA headquarters. She struck me as a young woman filled with life and positivity. Heartbroken to learn she was one of the 2 tragically murdered last night by a Jew-hating radical screaming Free Palestine, or somebody who was attacking Israelis because he thought they were committing genocide against Palestine. For you guys to force that into anything racial and, of course, make it Jew-hating, rest in peace, which is sad. Because now she's clearly being used by monsters like Lee Zeldin and the rest. And that she got killed in general, and anything the violence being committed and her family that suffers. Yes, it all matters. But why in the world is the EPA making this tweet? Why was she meeting with him? What does that have to do with anything? Something very strange is going on here, guys. Now, Gen X Girl just simply points out, here's Senator John Cronin, all of them, left and right, couldn't race out fast enough to make statements like this. The murder of the Jewish couple working for Israel's embassy in D.C. is abhorrent and is an attack on the Jewish community. It's an attack on people. For you guys to force it into the Jewish discussion shows you how desperate this is. The Justice Department must immediately investigate how the suspect was radicalized, what groups he was a part of, and what foreign nation might be funding those attacks. They are going to milk this dry. Call this what it is, terrorism. I'm sure that's what you're going to work it into. Probably some Iran influence or whatever you guys want to make it out to be based on some intelligence report that we're not allowed to see. Typical. But her point is she's going to organize all of their comments, I'm guessing, and coordinate them, look back to her account. Well, of course, the part that's not getting discussed, this is yesterday, the same day that all happened. Netanyahu says Trump's ethnic cleansing plan is a condition to end the war. On Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said President Trump's plan, that is what he's calling it, to remove Palestinians' population from Gaza was a condition to end Israel's genocidal war on the besieged territory. Quote, I am prepared to end the war on Gaza under clear conditions that will ensure the safety of Israel. All the hostages come home, which they already could have done many times over. Hamas lays down its arms, which they already offered to do, steps down from power, which they've already offered to do, is leadership exiled from the Strip. That's the only thing they haven't offered to do. That's ethnic cleansing, regardless of what you think. Because it's everybody, all of them. And Israel's been funding them, so that has to be playing into your factor of how this makes sense. It says, Gaza's totally disarmed and we carry out the Trump plan. That's what he's calling it. A plan that is so correct and so revolutionary. They just love to just pat each other on the back. It's so funny. So ethnic cleansing, total occupation. Gee, doesn't that sound like, I don't know, exactly what all of us were telling you was the day one plan and that we proved to you with their own statements? Yeah, funny how we ended up in exactly this position. And yet none of us will ever get credit for pointing that out until Tucker and Jones tell you they always knew and they were right the whole time. It says Trump has repeatedly called for removal of Gaza and their population as part of the plan for the U.S. to take over the territory, and as previously said, there would be no right of return for Palestinians. Well, they don't get the right to do that. That's a international law dynamic, but they don't care. Netanyahu's comments on Wednesday marked the first time he said the expulsion of Palestinian population was a condition to end the war, even though it's been the day one point. It's been clear since October 2023 that the Israeli government wanted ethnic cleansing. They literally told you if you weren't too dumb to pay attention. I shouldn't say it like that, but it's frustrating, guys. It's been there from day one. And Trump's calls have emboldened Netanyahu and other officials to pursue a plan to carry it out. It still remains unclear where the Palestinians would go. Netanyahu recently told the Knesset committee, like their Congress, that the lack of countries willing to take them was the main problem, preventing immigration. No, it's that they don't want to leave and you're forcing them to. That's the problem. And most of these countries don't want to be involved with that ongoing issue that will clearly continue because you guys are genocidal maniacs, or the fact that you're allowing them to displace them. Netanyahu also vowed on Wednesday that Israel would fully occupy Gaza. I mean, even that right now, saying that right now is insane. It's obviously illegal, no matter what you justify it with. All of Gaza territories will be under Israeli security control, he says, and Hamas will be totally defeated. They'll never say that, by the way. There'll always be an excuse. It'll always be something. And the bottom line is that is illegal occupation. It is right now, and it will continue to be. We all told you this was coming. The Israeli leader also said Israel would set up a sterile zone in southern Gaza for the civilian population. So they're literally, this is like final solution stuff, guys. They are literally doing this in front of you. They're starving to death. 50 plus children have dropped dead from starvation. They're continuing to do this. It's just, you need to come to terms with this and stop hiding from what this is. Smotrich, the finance minister, has said that under Israel's plan for the current military offensive, the civilian population would be literally concentrated into a tiny area of the south and then pressured to leave Gaza. They're making fun of you. You don't think they accidentally said that, do you? The Gazan citizens will be concentrated in the south, he said. They will be totally despairing, understanding that there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza. It will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places. So his point is, we've made it so disgustingly bad for them that they'll have to leave. And still yet they don't want to, because they're resilient and they refuse to bow to your Zionist genocidal interests. But nobody cares. I mean, we all care, but the power structures that have anything to do anything about it don't care. They don't care that you care. They don't care that you see it. Clearly something else is either more threatening, more financially influential, or more controlling. I'm sure you know what I think that is. But how do you not recognize that? Everyone calls this out. Every human rights group, everybody. I mean, even the government's now starting to shift tone, and yet it still keeps going, and they still keep funding them. Yeah, that didn't stop. It's just insanely clear. I just hope people can start to find the courage to call this out in a real way. Otherwise, they're going to get what they want from this. I really, really hope that doesn't come to pass. Well, thank you for tuning in today, guys. I will leave you with a clip of this interview that we just had. It's the ending song that Grant played for us. Very talented musician. Grant Elman interview, Revolution Through Music. And he did a live performance on the show and played a song about Gaza. So I thought it was fitting to play this at the end. Please listen to it. He's an excellent musician. All the links to his information will be in the link included in this show. Support him. He does great work, and he really does speak out about a lot of important things. So I'll leave that with you guys today. Thank you for tuning in. Please, please find the courage to speak up about these things. Do your research. Don't take claims at face value, whether it be from this show or anybody else. You need to realize how important it is to check these things and to hold people to account, even and most importantly, those that you support. Just today, I think more than anything, they're taking advantage of people's willingness to want to see the best in anybody, because we've had so many bad people in a row. That's the kind of the game. It's becoming worse and worse and stupider, and then they keep getting lesser and lesser of evils. And the bottom line is people feel almost obligated to just stand with their choice because, well, they would have been worse. Well, no, it all would have been worse. Every single day we're seeing how much worse they can get until we find the courage to stand up and say, not anymore. We're not going to allow the game to continue. We're going to do something to stop it. Whatever that means to you. I've got plenty of ideas. All I need is people to begin to be motivated to do something about it. As always, guys, the point comes down to, the first step is even acknowledging that we have a problem. And right now, we can't even agree on that from left and right. So until we can get past that point, at least the majority, and acknowledge what the problem really is, we're not going to begin to even start to solve it. We need to get there. Help people see this, break this out, have conversations, start new groups, find it. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Sing and Pray. the war today. Sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. I wish that we could end the war today, but for now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying. Historically, the worst atrocities committed by humanity always done under the illusion of authority. When individuals abdicate a personal responsibility, carrying out hateful orders commanded by a state. You know, authority is immoral when people blindly follow orders instead of conscience. Always leads to horrors like the genocides committed under countless regimes. Bolshevik and Soviets and Maoist Chinese. Barack, drone bomber, Obama get a Nobel Peace Prize. Fight more violence than any other to take the Oval Office. Ironic, but the real problem is the camel costume or the followers the politicians call their dogs. State of Israel doing the same and it's making me nauseous. Call it a war, but in reality it's just a slaughter. Netanyahu got his dogs out and we had better stop him. Violations of natural law face the judgments of God. Wish that we could end the war today. For now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying for sacred lives that we got, yeah. I wish that we could end the war today. For now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying. Yeah, I'm so tired of terrorist media mongering machines telling us to pick a side, invest in their schemes. They lie to divide, paralyze a state of defeat. The only side to choose is whether you pro-war or you pro-peace. That's what I'm sending to Palestine, the people in need. As bombs raining down on innocent civilians, they bleed. Bullets popping, white phosphorus dropping. Gaza cannot be seen, no sign of hostages that Hamas ostensibly holding. They bomb the hospital, death tolls exploding every day. 10,000, 15,000 men were lost in the rubble is what they say. It's a genocide. Zionists always pointing the finger of blame, claiming they are the victim once again. Inversion the name of the game. Enough of the hate, murderous ways. Gather your faith, won't take the bait. Walking in peace, we live in peace, and we demand in peace today. We're walking, living, and we demand in peace today. We're walking peace, we live in peace, and we demand in peace today. Yeah. Wish that we could end the war today. For now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying for sacred lives that we got, yeah. I wish that we could end the war today. For now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying for sacred lives that we got, yeah. We got, yeah. Sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. I wish that we could end the war today, but for now the highest action is to sing and pray. We got to sing and pray for all the lives that we've lost. Singing and praying for sacred lives that we got, yeah. Yeah, thanks again for having me. My name is Grant Presence. Thanks again, Ryan Cristian, Last American Vagabond. Really stoked to be here, grateful. Sing and pray for Palestine. Much love, y'all.